Chapter 191. With a whoosh, Chu Mu was ejected from the small sword pagoda. The time incense had just burned to the 50th segment. Everyone stared at the time incense, dumbfounded. They were too shocked to say a word. Last time, it was only 39 segments. This time it was 50 segments. Such a huge improvement seemed to have never happened in the past 10 years. His ranking will advance by at least 10 or even 20 places. Someone finally reacted and exclaimed while sucking in a breath of cold air, "That's too scary." Xie Donghua and the others were also shocked, and their expressions changed greatly. Even Han Ao was unable to maintain his calm. He remembered very clearly that although he had made some progress during his first and second challenges, he had only lasted for 2 more incense sticks of time. Even Huangfu Shanglong, who was ranked first, had only improved by 4 segments of incense. Han Ao thought about it carefully. Among all the people he knew, including those from a few years ago or more than a decade ago, there had never been anyone who could last more than 5 incense sticks longer in the second challenge of the small sword pagoda, let alone 11 incense sticks. What a scary guy. Fortunately, I raised the bet early. Otherwise, he would definitely surpass me in the future. Although Han Ao thought highly of himself, he was not a fool. He had to admit that one day he would be surpassed by Chu Mu. However, it's only 50 segments of incense. I estimate that he will only be ranked in the 40s. He still can't compare with me. As long as he becomes a member of the AO Sword Gang, he will be a member of the AO Sword Gang. Even if he dies, he will be a ghost of the AO Sword Gang. Han Ao thought to himself. Luo Yufeng was shocked and sad at the same time. 50 segments of incense. Compared to Han Ao's 61, there was a difference of 11 segments. Chu Mu's ranking could not be higher than Han Ao's. Although I'm extremely shocked, Chu Mu will lose for sure. Many old students said, one after another. It's hard to say. Last time, Chu Mu only lasted 39 segments of incense, but in the end he was ranked 65th. Maybe this time will be as special as last time. Xie Donghua and the others also shook their heads in agreement. Special situations rarely occurred. Chu Mu's face was calm. He walked back to his original position without saying a word. Most of his mind was immersed in the memory of the perfect phantom step. Batch after batch entered the small sword pagoda. Finally, the last student of the last batch was ejected. Everyone's gaze became fervent. They held their breaths and stared at the iron sword leaderboard. Countless names rapidly changed on the leaderboard. In the end, under thousands of people's gazes, 100 names were fixed from 201st to 300th. Sun Chong Feng, Nangong Haoyang, Gao Guling, and the others' names. Compared to last time, they had improved by 2 ranks. It was not very obvious, but it was enough to motivate them. However, it was compared to Chu Mu's name. 200 names, Chu Guling, ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha, ha ha ha, ha ha, ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha, ha ha, ha ha ha. Lian Qingyan and Huangfu Changtian's rankings had advanced by 2 places as well. The 2 of them were still arranged at the front and back, but this time it was Huangfu Changtian who was in front of Lian Qingyan, and the 2 of them seemed to be at odds. Sigh, I actually didn't improve. Me too? Some of the older students looked at their rankings and sighed with a dejected look on their faces. I'm even worse. I actually fell back 1 rank. Don't talk. The names on the iron sword leaderboard flickered and changed again. Everyone knew that the main event was coming. Immediately, no matter if they were happy for their own improvement, dejected, or annoyed, all of them raised their spirits. They removed all distracting thoughts and held their breaths. They stared at the iron sword leaderboard with sparkling eyes. 3 breaths seemed to be as long as 3 years. In the end, it was fixed at 100 names. Xie Donghua took a look and saw that his name was ranked 64th. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and revealed a smile. Han Ao immediately found his name in the top 30. He was ranked 27th. Compared to before, rising one rank was not an easy matter. Where's Chu-Mu? That's right. Where is his name? Many students searched for Chu-Mu's name on the Iron Sword leaderboard, but they could not find it. Could it be that he didn't make the leaderboard? Are you stupid? If he can't make the leaderboard after persisting for 50 incense sticks, then who can? That's strange. Why can't I see it? Could it be that he suddenly advanced into the top 30? Everyone was shocked and hastily moved their gazes up into the silver name region. They looked at each name carefully, but still did not see Chu-Mu's name. It can't be. Could it be that he... Immediately a nearly impossible guess welled up in their minds. Impossible. Han Ao's face changed, and he secretly comforted himself. Everyone's gazes continued to move up into the golden name region. Chu-Mu, fifth. Each of them had difficulty breathing as if they were drowning. Even their words were intermittent, as if they were about to die. Hit me and see if I'm dreaming. A slap sounded, and that person's face swelled up. However, he ignored it and stared blankly at the name on the Iron Sword leaderboard. He did not say anything, as if he had lost his soul. Inconceivable. I can't believe it. It's unexpectedly fifth. Have I not woken up yet? After a short moment of silence, the place exploded and became lively. Everyone began to discuss loudly. Junior brother, I'm not dreaming, right? Luo Yufeng said with difficulty. Yes, it's real. Chu-Mu nodded. If there was one person who could maintain his calm, it would be him, although he was shocked by his own ranking. Chu-Mu also felt that it was natural. I have to report this to the palace master. I wonder how the palace master will react. The red-robed attendant was expressionless as he stared at Chu-Mu and thought to himself, 50 hours. Chu-Mu said to Han Ao beside him. Han Ao's face immediately turned ugly, as if he had eaten shit. However, words that had been said were like water that could not be spilled. There was no way to take it back, especially for someone as arrogant and self-important as Han Ao. There was no way he would go back on his word. I'll pass it to you. Han Ao's face gradually returned to normal. He stared deeply at Chu-Mu and said, But I still hope that you can join our sect. With your talent, you will definitely be valued by our sect. When the time comes, you will enjoy various resources to speed up your cultivation. Thank you for your kindness. There's no need to mention this again. Han Ao's attitude was out of Chu-Mu's expectations. He thought that even if Han Ao did not go back on his word, he would at least say a few harsh words. It seemed that those who could leave their names on the steel sword ranking were all outstanding talents. Han Ao shook his head and stopped talking. However, he was still thinking. Just as he had said, his invitation had never been rejected. This time would not be an exception. He had to find a way to make Chu-Mu join the Proud Sword sect. Han Ao had an intuition that with Chu-Mu, the Proud Sword sect would definitely become stronger in the future. They might even have the chance to compete with the three alliances and become the fourth alliance. The small sword pagoda ranking battle ended once again. The news that Chu-Mu had won 5th place swept through the entire outer mansion like a storm, causing a huge uproar in the outer mansion. After leaving the small sword pagoda, the Red Deacon quickly went to the sword tower where the outer mansion master resided to report the news. Oh, from 65th place to 5th place, a total of 60 places. The outer mansion master was also greatly surprised and shocked. It seems that he had not fully adapted to the challenge of the small sword pagoda and held back some of his strength. However, in the past 100 years, he is the first person to have such speed of improvement. People like him are all monsters with unstoppable sharpness. Lord Mansion Master, do you want to summon him? The Red Deacon asked. No. The Mansion Master shook his head. I will summon him when he breaks through to the Qi transformation realm. Yes. The Red Deacon nodded and retreated. Junior brother. Luo Yufeng's face was still filled with excitement. His heart was still immersed in the shock of confirming that Chu Mu had really won 5th place. Chu Mu smiled slightly and did not say anything. "Junior brother, I will go back first." Luo Yufeng thought for a moment and said. The two parted ways, and Chu Mu returned to the 65th Sword Pagoda. He thought for a moment about whether he should go to the Hall of 100 Affairs and apply for a challenge to the owner of the 5th Sword Pagoda, Huang Fuquang. In fact, the 100 independent Sword Pagoda were almost identical. Therefore, even if he defeated Huang Fuquang and moved into the 5th Sword Pagoda, there would be nothing special. At most, it would sound a little more advanced. "Tomorrow, I will go to the Hall of 100 Affairs and apply for a challenge to Huang Fuquang." Chu Mu finally made a decision. It was not for the right to live in the 5th Sword Pagoda, but out of his heart. He wanted to fight with a strong opponent and improve himself through actual combat. In the 5th Sword Pagoda, Huang Fuquang, who was practicing his swordsmanship, suddenly grinned when he heard the results of the small Sword Pagoda ranking battle. Chu Mu, a new student. How interesting. After being bored for half a year, there is finally someone worthy of me making a move. I hope he won't disappoint me. Huang Fuquang muttered to himself. He sheathed his sword and carried it on his back. He strode out of the Sword Pagoda and out of the seal. At the same time, the people in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Sword Pagoda were all alarmed by this news. This was because it had been a long time since anyone had been able to enter the top 10. This time, there was a new student who had entered the top 10 in the 2nd challenge of the small Sword Pagoda. Moreover, he was 5th. How could they not be shocked? Suddenly, people who usually did not show up were a little restless. Not long from now, there would be a day where the winds and clouds would surge and the eyes of the masses would be fixed on them. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 192. Chu Mu, tomorrow afternoon, you will battle with Huang Fuquang on the battle arena, said the deacon of the Hall of 100 Things, concisely. He then smiled and said, "You've done something that no one else could do. It's amazing. I wonder what level you'll reach in the future. I'll have to trouble you." Chu Mu laughed and nodded his head. Huang Fuquang is a member of the royal family. He has an arrogant temperament. When he first entered the sword mansion, he went around challenging people. However, later on, his strength rose to an extremely high level, and there were too few people who could fight him. Half a year ago, his sword chi cultivation had reached the peak of the half-step chi transformation stage, and the conception he had comprehended was rather special. It was called the conception of power, and it was said that he had already comprehended 29% of it. The fake sword he uses is a heavy sword that weighs 100 kilograms. His mountain-cutting sword art has been practiced to perfection. His strength is astonishing. You have to be careful. It's best not to fight him head-on, said the deacon of the Hall of 100 Affairs. Thank you, deacon. Chu Mu saluted with his sword. I hope you can win again, the deacon said as he returned the sword salute and then took his leave. Huang Fuquang, I didn't expect you to be even more anxious than me, Chu Mu muttered to himself, revealing a faint smile. He was somewhat looking forward to the final battle the day after tomorrow. The news of Huang Fuquang taking the initiative to issue a challenge quickly spread, and everyone in the outer palace knew about it. All of them said that there was going to be a good show to watch. Huang Fuquang was extremely powerful and had been famous for a long time. As a super dark horse of the younger generation, Chu Mu was stunning. The final battle between the two would definitely be a clash of the strongest. Many people were looking forward to it. They couldn't wait for the final battle to begin. Time flowed like water, and in the blink of an eye, the day of the final battle arrived. The battle arena outside the Hall of 100 Affairs was completely surrounded by people. It was crowded inside and outside. It was unusually lively, other than the ordinary new and old students. Even the top 100 people on the Iron Sword list had arrived one after another. Look, That's Li Changsheng, ranked 10th. A cry of surprise rang out. Everyone turned their heads to look. I also want the 8th ranked Duan Qinghai. I see her. She's number 6, Lu Mei. 4th place, Huang Fufian. It's too exciting. Even without the battle between Chu Mu and Huang Fuquang, I feel satisfied just by watching them. Are you stupid? If it weren't for the battle between Chu Mu and Huang Fuquang, they wouldn't have appeared. That's the 3rd ranked Ouyang Qingya, the 2nd ranked Qin Shi, and the 1st ranked Huang Fu Shanglong. I didn't expect that the 3 of them would also appear. Amidst the lively discussions, Chu Mu and Huang Fuquang arrived here. However, the first battle was not between the 2 of them, but between Xie Donghua and Bu Chun. Their sword techniques collided and their concepts intersected. It was abnormally intense, and it was too much for the spectators to take in. In the end, Xie Donghua narrowly defeated Bu Chun and obtained the right to reside in the 64th Sword Tower. Bu Chun, on the other hand, had to either pay a certain price to challenge Xie Donghua next month or participate in the ranking battle of the Small Sword Pagoda 3 months later. The second battle was between Han Ao and Wan Song. In the end, Han Ao was defeated by Wan Song and could only continue to reside in the 28th Sword Tower. As for the duration of the cultivation, Holy Land, Han Ao and Wan Song were the same. Huang Fuquang, Chu Mu, come up to the stage. The deacon of the 100 Affairs Hall announced, loudly. Immediately, the spectators' hearts were burning with excitement. Ha! A wild laugh shook the 9 heavens. Immediately after, a figure soared into the sky. His aura was biting cold, and his aura was dense and overbearing. He shot straight into the sky above the battle arena and landed straight down. His every movement was filled with power. When he landed, a loud sound was heard, and the entire battle arena seemed to tremble slightly. Chu Mu, come up. Huang Fuquang waved his sword in its scabbard, stirring up the wind and clouds. The air whistled as he pointed at the crowd. His aura condensed and pressed forward, almost suffocating everyone. The penetrating power of his voice was extremely strong, like the clanging of metal, causing people's bodies to unconsciously tremble. Among the crowd, a figure soared into the sky, and with a turn in the air, he landed lightly on the battle arena like a gust of wind. Your movement technique is not bad, but I wonder how your swordsmanship is. Huang Fuquang laughed loudly. He pointed his heavy sword at Chu Mu, and the momentum of flying sand and stones rushed towards him. You will know soon. Chu Mu replied indifferently. His aura was condensed, and he was not affected in the slightest. Huang Fuquang was as his name suggested. He was tall and strong, and was half a head taller than Chu Mu. His rough face made him look extremely heroic and masculine. His eyes contained a kind of arrogance that came from the bottom of his heart. It was innate and not cultivated. This kind of arrogance had long been integrated into his bones, forming his own unique temperament. Huang Fuquang's arrogance was based on his own strength and foundation. It was a kind of true temperament and not an act. Ordinary swordsmen would have been weakened by Huang Fuquang's aura. Once they attacked, their aura would be even weaker, and they would not be his opponent at all. However, Chu Mu appeared to be at ease. He allowed Huang Fuquang's aura to attack him, and completely dissolved it, which attracted Huang Fuquang's attention. You have some ability. She nodded. She was a beauty, but she did not have the slightest sense of weakness. Instead, she had a bit of a manly spirit, and was filled with a strange attraction. If you don't have the ability, how can you get 5th place? Ouyang Qingye said indifferently with his hands behind his back. Huang Fu Xinglong was a man of few words, but when he stood there without making any movements, he would not be ignored by others. That was because there was a kind of endless aura coming from him. If he can defeat that big guy, then it's worth it for me to make a move. Huang Fu Fian giggled. She had a petite body and a lively personality, giving others the feeling that she was a child. However, if anyone treated her as a child, they would definitely regret it. A new student, getting 5th place by luck is already the best he can do, but he still wants to defeat Huang Fuquang. Duan Tringhai sneered. Yes, Huang Fuquang has been in 5th place for 9 months, although he did not participate in the small sword pagoda ranking battle. His strength must have increased a lot compared to 9 months ago. Li Chongqing nodded and slowly said, "This new student called Chu Mu was able to get 5th place. His strength is at most equivalent to Huang Fuquang from 9 months ago. He is not a match for the current Huang Fuquang. You have attracted my attention, so I will not be lenient." Huang Fuquang grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. His eyes shone brightly, and his aura became even more domineering. "Draw your sword," Chu Mu said indifferently as he slowly pulled out the fake clear wind sword. "Okay," Huang Fuquang roared as he pulled out his sword. The moment the heavy sword was pulled out, the ear-piercing sound of friction caused goosebumps to rise all over people's body. Huang Fuquang's sword was 3 meters long. The hilt was 30 centimeters, and the blade was 1 meter long. It was longer than an ordinary sword, and the blade was as wide as a palm and as thick as 2 fingers. At first glance, it gave people an oppressive feeling of sharpness and power. The heavy sword was unsheathed and slashed forward. The terrifying sound of air exploding could be heard, causing people's scalps to go numb. The air seemed to be split apart, and the compressed air rushed towards Chu Mu, making puffing sounds. This kind of pressure was enough to turn an ordinary strong man into minced meat on the spot. Chu Mu's sword pierced out, and a green light flashed in everyone's eyes. Then, with a puffing sound, Huang Fuquang's pressure was dispersed, turning into a cool breeze. Huang Fuquang roared like a fierce beast. He held his sword with both hands and took a step forward. A terrifying aura immediately rushed out. His eyes emitted a sharp light as he waved his sword. The pitch-black heavy sword brazenly pierced out, and a whistling sound rang out. The pitch-black sword penetrated the air, and the air was suddenly pushed by a terrifying force, crushing towards Chu Mu like a mountain. "Break!" Chu Mu unsheathed his sword. There were no hands, only a few flashes of sword light. Almost at the same time, the mountain-like air collapsed once again. With a casual slash of his sword, a cool breeze blew out, containing a sharp coldness, causing everyone's eyes to light up. "Break!" Huang Fuquang exhaled and roared. His aura was astonishing. The pitch-black heavy sword crushed the cool breeze, bringing along layers of sword shadows. It was like a black mountain descending, blasting towards Chu Mu. Strength, pure strength. Even the fluctuating sword chi was filled with a feeling of extreme yang energy, as if it wanted to use pure strength to bombard, suppress, and crush everything. In an instant, Chu Mu felt an immense pressure. This kind of strength was heavy, and it made it difficult for him to breathe. Unavoidably, the two swords collided, and a sonorous sound rang out, causing people to lose their hearing. Dazzling sparks flew out, and a terrifying pressure surged over, causing Chu Mu's expression to change slightly. The pseudo-clear wind sword instantly bent and fiercely bounced back. Chu Mu borrowed the force of the collision to retreat. His hand loosened slightly, and the pseudo-clear wind sword rotated in his palm. Using this unique technique, Chu Mu dispersed the surging power. He once again grasped the pseudo-clear wind sword tightly. His attention towards Huang Fuquang had risen to the peak. Huang Fuquang's 2 feet repeatedly stomped on the ground, causing the sword fighting stage to tremble and let out rumbling noises. A pure and terrifying boundless energy charged towards Chu Mu as if it wanted to crush a mountain. Using both hands, the pitch-black heavy sword pierced forward. The terrifying power pierced through the tip of the sword, and countless ripples appeared in the air. This kind of sword was something that even an ordinary chi Transformation Realm sword artist would not dare to face. It was not a killing move, but its power was already close to a high-level killing move. Under the combination of strength and speed, it was incomparably shocking. Chu Mu's sword lightly tapped on the pitch-black heavy sword. Without waiting for its power to explode, his body floated in an arc, and he quickly moved to the side, dodging Huang Fuquang's powerful attack. The pitch-black heavy sword missed and bombarded the air. Instantly, the air was shattered into countless pieces, and one could faintly see a thin cyclone shooting forward, shooting out of the arena. An old student's expression greatly changed, and he hurriedly activated his sword chi armor. With a bang, the sword chi armor shattered, and he retreated 2 steps, his face pale with fear. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 193. Haha, take my sword again. Huang Fuquang's sword missed, and he suddenly twisted his body while laughing wildly. He held his sword with both hands and slashed horizontally. A terrifying sword aura burst forth as if he wanted to cut a mountain in half. Chu Mu's figure had just landed on the ground when it split into a phantom. The phantom was shattered, but Chu Mu appeared beside Huang Fuquang. His sword was like a breeze. Blocking with a sword, Huang Fuquang didn't retreat. Instead, he pressed forward and lifted his heavy sword upwards. Chu Mu's sword light changed, and the vibrating force slightly knocked the heavy sword aside. His sword stabbed straight towards Huang Fuquang's face. Huang Fuquang's left hand released the hilt of his sword and flicked his finger towards Chu Mu's sword. Unexpectedly, his eyes flashed and his finger missed. The cold and sharp light was still locked on, and a cold star was reflected in his pupils. Huang Fuquang's eyes trembled and his expression changed slightly. He stomped heavily on the ground and flew back like a cannonball. He once again held his sword with both hands and slashed out sword aura that could split mountains and stones, crisscrossing and slashing towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu shattered the first sword aura with a single slash, and then used the momentum to use Wandering in the Wind to shuttle through the sword aura. The fake clear wind sword fiercely attacked. Pay attention, I'm going to use my full strength. Huang Fuquang shouted openly. Suddenly, a strange fluctuation rose from his body. Chu Mu knew that it was the fluctuation of a concept, but it was different from the various concepts that he had grasped or even felt. It was a very pure concept fluctuation, giving people a feeling of a thick and explosive power. There was nothing else but power. Moreover, the level of this concept fluctuation was not low. Just as the deacon of the 100 Affairs Hall said, his concept had reached 29%. In the outer house, there were 12 cultivation holy lands, but none of them could accelerate the comprehension of the concept of power. From this point, Huang Fuquang was already behind others. However, he had already comprehended 29% of his power. This level of comprehension was astonishing. Chu He and Su Jianfeng were nothing compared to him. If it weren't for the gap between 30% and 40%, many people wouldn't be able to cross it at all. Even those with strong comprehension abilities would have to spend a long time before they could cross it. It was precisely because of this that Huang Fuquang had chosen to remain at the peak of half-step Qi transformation realm. He was 80% confident that once he broke through to the Qi transformation realm, his strength would definitely increase to 40%. At this moment, Huang Fuquang unreservedly displayed 29% of his power. Terrifying energy waves gushed out like lava from a volcano, ferocious and unparalleled. The people around the sword battle arena had no choice but to retreat because their expressions changed drastically. They felt extremely uncomfortable and oppressed, and even breathing became incomparably difficult. What a terrifying concept! Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a trace of seriousness as he muttered to himself. The concept of power was different from the concept of wind. It was a kind of special concept, and special concepts often had their own uniqueness. They were even more powerful than normal concepts. In other words, a 29% concept of power was comparable to a 30% concept of wind. Ranked fifth with such strength, just how strong are the top four? Chu Mu still had the leisure to ponder this question. Stone Splitter. With an explosive shout, Huang Fu Kuang, who was under the influence of his concept of strength, was like a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus Rex. He slashed out with his heavy sword, and a terrifying sword chi condensed and gushed out. The sword slashed out, and a trench actually appeared on the sword battle stage. The speed wasn't fast, but the power was extremely strong. Even Huangfu Xinglong and the others had a trace of seriousness in their eyes. Big Guy's strength is even stronger, Huangfu Fian said with a smile, shaking her head. What a powerful sword skill. Chu Mu was inwardly shocked, but he didn't fight back. He clearly knew that strength wasn't his forte. Using something he wasn't good at against something his opponent was good at was a stupid thing to do. He used his phantom body art, and 3 phantoms appeared, staggered left and right. The 3 phantoms were instantly destroyed by the stone splitter, and Chu Mu appeared in front of Huang Fu Kuang like a breeze. Wind shaking the forest. Huang Fu Kuang was shocked, and he hurriedly waved his sword. The pitch-black heavy sword's momentum was huge, and it shattered the incoming wind. Ground splitter! With another shout, Huang Fu Kuang borrowed the force of the collision with the wind shaking the forest to soar into the sky. Sword chi surged, and his power was violent. His sword landed on the ground like a meteor. Chu Mu's scalp went numb, and he hurriedly used his wind-sweeping shadow to dodge. With a bang, dust flew everywhere and rocks flew everywhere. The sword battle arena, which had already been torn apart, had another hole. Huang Fu Kuang's sword was stuck in the hole, and there were still countless sword chi shooting out. Chu Mu's figure swayed, and he avoided the incoming rocks and sword chi. Golden edge, splitting sky. Huang Fu Kuang's hair stood on end. He pulled out his heavy sword and placed it in front of him, and his sword chi turned into an armor. A clanging sound exploded, and a golden light flashed past. Huang Fu Kuang only felt his hands tremble, and a terrifying sharpness penetrated through. The sword chi armor was shattered in an instant. His reaction was extremely fast, and the moment the sword chi armor shattered, he soared into the sky, avoiding the follow-up attack. Mountain-breaking slash. Huang Fu Kuang's heavy sword was raised high above his head, and sword chi gathered around his body. He didn't hold back at all. This sword was Huang Fu Kuang's strongest sword. Before the killing move landed, the terrifying aura had already condensed the surrounding air, and people had no choice but to retreat again to maintain their breathing. Huang Fu Xinglong and the others' expressions changed slightly. This kind of sword already made them feel a great threat. On the sword battle arena, Chu Mu only felt the air being compressed, as if there was a mountain above him pressing down, wanting to squash him into a meat patty. Then, a sword light that seemed to come from outer space, dazzling and filled with a sense of destruction, split the mountain in half and heavily smashed it to the ground. A cool breeze blew past Chu Mu's eyes, and sword chi surged, causing his clothes to flutter. He swung his sword upwards, without the slightest trace of smoke or fire. In the next breath, a gentle breeze blew. The wind rippled, the wind howled, and the wind roared. Simplified form of wind. It's that sword. Lien Qingyan and the others were stunned. The moon-breaking slash and the simplified form of wind collided, and violent explosions sounded out continuously. A cold killing intent spiraled in the wind, and it drew an arc in the air, shooting towards Huang Fu Kuang. Huang Fu Kuang's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly raised his sword to block in front of him, barely blocking the killing intent. With a bang, the killing intent shattered, and the huge impact caused Huang Fu Kuang to fly out uncontrollably. Below him was the sword battle arena, and once he fell out of the arena, it would be his loss. Turning around in midair, Huang Fu Kuang slashed out with his heavy sword, and the sword Qi hit the ground, creating a recoil. Huang Fu Kuang's body paused for a moment, and his palm was wrapped in sword Qi, slapping the ground that was shot out, and he flew back to the sword battle arena. Just as he landed on the stage, he saw a figure approaching from the corner of his eyes, and he subconsciously slashed out with his sword. Chu Mu dodged Huang Fu Kuang's sword and brought out layers of afterimages. There were 9 of them surrounding Huang Fu Kuang, and it was hard for Huang Fu Kuang to distinguish between real and fake. "I don't care if you're real or fake. I'll break you with one sword." Huang Fu Kuang didn't care anymore. The muscles on his hands bulged, and a terrifying power burst out. Under the intent realm, his strength doubled, and his heavy sword swept out in all directions, looking like a mighty army sweeping away 1,000 soldiers. It wasn't a sword technique, but pure strength. Chu Mu was excited to see this, and the sword light turned gentle. The sword stabbed out, light and slow, allowing people to clearly see the trajectory. It seemed soft and powerless, but when it came into contact, Huang Fu Kuang found that his powerful sword seemed to have fallen into a quagmire, and it became extremely difficult. His expression changed, and he exhaled. He used even more strength, but he still couldn't turn the situation around. Huang Fu Kuang couldn't help but think back to the time when he practiced his sword technique in the pool. Now he felt that it was even more difficult than when he practiced in the pool, and it greatly restricted the power of his sword technique, making it difficult for him to fully display it. Using softness to overcome strength. As a sword grandmaster, Chu Mu only practiced one basic sword technique on Earth. However, the basic sword technique had been summarized and modified by generations of sword masters, and it was all-encompassing. After Chu Mu reached the level of a sword grandmaster, he gradually realized that the basic sword technique he practiced seemed to be the same as the basic sword technique on the ancient sword continent, but the essence it contained was much deeper. He had just opened a new door and stepped into a new world of sword techniques. The rhythm began to be controlled by Chu Mu, and Huang Fu Kuang's sword became slow and powerless. He couldn't help but feel depressed. The 2 sword techniques and 1 killing move that he refined couldn't do anything to Chu Mu, and his 29% intent realm couldn't suppress him either. Even in the final clash of sword techniques, he was at a disadvantage. This kind of weak and powerless feeling when he swung his sword with all his strength was as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. There was a kind of difficulty that came from the depths of his body, and it made Huang Fu Kuang almost vomit blood. After a few sword strikes, the feeling of difficulty became deeper, and it made him dumbfounded. "Stop fighting! Stop fighting! You win this time!" Huang Fu Kuang shouted. He withdrew his sword and quickly retreated with a depressed look on his face. This kind of fighting isn't satisfying enough. He comprehended the intent realm of strength, and he mainly focused on strength. What he liked the most was a head-on clash of strength. Obviously, Chu Mu didn't focus on strength. He won just like that. The spectators were all stunned. They felt that this kind of ending was a little strange, and they wanted to continue. What they wanted to see was a complete victor between the 2 of them. That kind of ending naturally meant that someone would be truly suppressed or even injured. Chu Mu also withdrew his sword and smiled slightly. Huang Fu Kuang was very strong. Chu Mu didn't need to hold back and used all his strength. The simplified version of Wind Image had also incorporated 30% of the intent realm of wind, but it was only slightly better than the opponent's mountain slashing slash. Chu Mu didn't have much sword qi left in his dantian. If the fight continued and Huang Fu Kuang used another killing move, he might have to use his sword force and phantom steps to perfection. At that time, even if he could win in the end, it wouldn't be easy for him. He might even be injured. "You're very strong, and I don't have the confidence to win against you. The 5th sword tower will belong to you from now on," Huang Fu Kuang continued. "However, let's compete again to see who can break through first and raise their intent realm to 40%. The bet is there's no bet. Okay. Chu Mu smiled. The battle came to an end. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 194. Chu Mu moved into the 5th tower. Compared to the 65th Sword Tower, the 5th Sword Tower was only slightly different in its layout. Chu Mu could see the characteristics of the original owner, so he made some simple adjustments to make it more suitable for his preferences. For Chu Mu, it was just a change of location. There wasn't much of a difference. However, in the eyes of others, this was an honor that made them green with envy. As for Huang Fuquang, he naturally moved to the 65th tower. The 5th Sword Tower was near the 4th and 6th Sword Towers. In the past, when Huang Fuquang lived here, people would often come to visit. However, after Chu Mu moved in, he didn't show any signs of visiting, so he naturally didn't welcome people visiting. The person in the 5th place can use the cultivation sacred land for a total of 120 hours, which is more than twice the amount of the person in the 65th place. Furthermore, Han Ao lost 50 hours to me in the bet, which adds up to a total of 175 hours. Sitting on the 2nd floor of the tower, Chu Mu muttered to himself, "It took me 50 hours to raise the concept of cloud from 20% to 30%. But the concept of metal is the 3rd concept, so it's harder to comprehend it. Even if I enter the sacred cultivation ground, it will be more difficult than the concept of cloud. 172 hours seems a lot, but it probably won't be enough for me to raise the concept of metal to 30%. No matter what, I'll use all of the 172 hours to comprehend the concept of metal. If I can't comprehend 30%, then I'll wait until the next round of the small sword tower ranking battle. I believe that at that time my sword chi cultivation will reach the peak of half-step chi transformation stage. My overall strength will increase again." After thinking about it, Chu Mu took the fake clear wind sword downstairs and walked out of the tower. He planned to go to the sacred cultivation ground. Take this. Chu Mu had only taken a few steps out of the seal when he suddenly heard a delicate shout. Then a fierce wind whistled from behind him. Chu Mu could clearly feel the sharpness of the wind. This sword came from the right side of my back. Chu Mu did not turn his head back. He quickly made an accurate judgment. His body flashed, and a shadow was left behind. Chu Mu's real body appeared next to the opponent. He unsheathed the fake clear wind sword, and his sword was like the wind. Chu Mu reacted quickly, but so did his opponent. At the same time that Chu Mu's sword missed its mark, he felt a sharp gust of wind pressing down on his face, and a cold star rapidly enlarged in front of his eyes. With a flick of his wrist, the fake clear wind sword shone with a dazzling light. The sword touched the cold star and made an ear-piercing sound. The power exploded from the tip of the sword, and the opponent was blown away. With a delicate shout, the opponent flew back like a swallow circling in the air. Both of her hands were holding a short sword, and they were gently flapping like wings. Her body drew an arc in the air like a swallow flying back. As the short swords vibrated, 2 sharp sword chi shot out. Chu Mu flicked out his sword, shattering the sword chi and bringing up a gust of wind. The opponent's body did not land on the ground. She used the gust of wind to circle in the air like a swallow and attacked Chu Mu from the side. The 2 thin short swords were incomparably sharp. The sharpness pierced through the air, making people's skin feel cold. Take this. Swallow sweeping wave. The delicate shout rang out again. Her body seemed to have turned into a swallow, and the sword chi seemed to have turned into a pair of wings. She was extremely nimble, and her speed suddenly increased a lot. With a whoosh, she flew toward Chu Mu. This move was extremely fast, making it impossible to dodge. Furthermore, the sword chi was extremely sharp. However, in Chu Mu's eyes, it did not have enough power. It seemed to be the prelude to a killing move. Chu Mu was slightly surprised. As his ears trembled, he slashed out with his sword. It seemed simple, but it blocked all of the opponent's following actions. The three swords collided with an ear-piercing sound, and sparks flew everywhere. The nimble body flew back and circled in the air before returning to attack Chu Mu. It was still the same move, swallow sweeping wave. However, Chu Mu had already seen through this move. He slashed out with his sword again, and once again blocked all of the opponent's following actions. After 3 consecutive times, the opponent's body circled in the air, but she did not attack again. Instead, she landed safely on the ground. Cold-faced man, how did you see through the swallow sweeping wave? Huang Fufian said angrily with her hands on her hips. She wasn't an idiot. On the contrary, she was very smart, so after her 3 consecutive flying swallow waves were blocked by Chu Mu, she knew that her opponent had seen through her flying swallow waves. This caused her to be both shocked and dissatisfied. The corner of Chu Mu's eyes twitched. Cold-faced man. Was that how she addressed him? Oi, why aren't you answering? Have you learned the lesser swallow sword art before? Huang Fufian asked again. She was startled, and doubt appeared on her face. She mumbled, "That can't be right." The lesser swallow sword art is a simplified version of the ancient sword art, the swallow sword art. Only the royal family should have it. This cold-faced man is clearly not a member of the royal family. How could he have learned the lesser swallow sword art? Chu Mu heard all of Huang Fufian's mumbling. Chu Mu was slightly surprised. So this sword art was called the lesser swallow sword art, and it was a simplified version of the ancient sword art, the swallow sword art. The ancient sword art was a profound sword art that was ranked above the super sword arts. It was a profound sword art that Chu Mu could not touch at the moment. As expected, a member of the royal family is incomparable to a disciple of a sword faction, Chu Mu sighed. He did not answer. He turned around to leave. Oi, cold-faced man, don't think you can leave like this. Huang Fufian reacted. She flew past Chu Mu like a swallow and blocked Chu Mu's path. You have to explain yourself. How did you see through my lesser swallow sword art? You haven't mastered it yet, Chu Mu calmly replied. Haven't mastered it yet? Huang Fufian was startled. Ever since she started practicing her sword art, she had always been praised. No one had ever told her that she had not mastered it yet. This was the first time she had heard such a thing. By the time Huang Fufian reacted, Chu Mu was already far away. Oi, oi, cold-faced man, stop right there. Tell me what I haven't mastered. Huang Fufian used her little swallow movement technique again and quickly chased after him. She shouted as she chased after him. Huang Fuquang happened to pass by and saw this. He quickly stopped Huang Fufian. Big guy, help me stop that cold-faced man, Huang Fufian immediately said. What? Huang Fuquang didn't react for a moment. Huang Fufian anxiously stomped her foot, but Chu Mu had already disappeared from her sight. She was so angry that she fiercely stomped on Huang Fuquang's foot. Ouch! Huang Fuquang immediately pretended to be in pain and jumped around while holding his foot. Stop pretending. It doesn't hurt at all, Huang Fufian said angrily. Hee, sister, who bullied you? Tell me, and I'll teach him a lesson for you. Huang Fuquang chuckled and put down his foot. The cold-faced man who defeated you. Huang Fufian rolled her eyes and said, It's him. Huang Fuquang was startled. He thought for a moment and shook his head. Sister, I can't help you with this. You know I'm not his match. Why don't you go find Brother Xinglong? I believe he can defeat Chu Mu. Humph, I knew I couldn't count on you. I'll go find Brother Xinglong now. Huang Fufian coldly snorted and turned around to leave. This Chu Mu is being targeted by the lesser swallow. Hee, maybe there will be a good show to watch in the future. Huang Fuquang rubbed his chin and let out a strange laugh. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 195. What a troublesome guy. Chu Mu thought to himself. However, that small flying swallow sword technique is indeed extraordinary. It truly is worthy of being a simplified version of an ancient sword technique. I wonder how powerful the true flying swallow sword technique is. As he thought about it, Chu Mu arrived at the entrance of the sacred ground. Chu Mu, congratulations on obtaining 5th place on the metal sword list. The guardian elder saw Chu Mu and immediately said with a smile, "Thank you, elder." Chu Mu said, "Haha, what are you thanking me for? You were able to obtain 5th place, but I didn't give you any help." The guardian elder said with a smile, "5th place has 125 hours of sacred ground use time. However, I heard that you had a bet with Han Ao. You won 50 hours from Han Ao, so you have a total of 175 hours. Which sacred ground do you plan to go to this time?" "I want to go to the Gold Sword Tomb." Chu Mu said. "Gold Sword Tomb." The guardian elder was stunned, thinking that he had misheard. "Yes," Chu Mu said with a certain tone. "Why do you want to go to the Gold Sword Tomb?" The guardian elder hurriedly persuaded. "I know that besides the concept of wind, you must have also comprehended the concept of cloud. In the entire outer palace, there was originally only one person who had comprehended 2 concepts, and with you, you would be the second. Although it is said that the more concepts the better, I believe you also know that comprehending concepts is very difficult. You should focus on the wind and cloud concepts. Don't think about comprehending a 3rd concept. It will only make it more difficult, and you won't have enough time." The guardian elder advised earnestly, hoping that Chu Mu could become a talent. However, he did not know the real situation of Chu Mu. "Thank you for your kindness, elder, but I still want to enter the Gold Sword Tomb," Chu Mu said, his will unshakable. "Since you have made up your mind, I cannot interfere with your decision. I only hope that you can consider it carefully." The guardian elder shook his head slightly and sighed. He took out the sword token and handed it to Chu Mu. "Thank you, elder." Chu Mu saluted with his sword, took the sword token, and walked into the light door. Chu Mu felt his whole body turn cold. This kind of cold was different from the cold of a world of ice and snow. It was a kind of cold that was full of sharpness. What entered his eyes was an expanse of ruins. It was incomparably desolate, causing Chu Mu's heart to tremble. He could not help but feel somewhat sorrowful. This was a small world with dim light. It didn't seem big, but it also seemed boundless. Everywhere he looked, there were swords. Complete swords, broken swords, worn swords, jagged swords, rusty swords, scattered on the ground, stuck in rocks, straight or crooked. They seemed to be telling of the past glories and the present desolation. Golden Sword Tomb. Golden Sword Tomb. Is this the graveyard of swords? Chu Mu could not help but murmur to himself. A wave of sorrow immediately surged from the bottom of his heart. It circled around his heart and did not disperse for a long time. Suddenly, his soul involuntarily trembled. It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over his head. A wave of coldness rushed from his spine to the soles of his feet. He suddenly became clear-headed. In an instant, all the swords, no matter if they were complete swords or broken swords, all began to tremble. They emitted a buzzing sound like countless bees dancing in the air. These swords seemed to have recovered their original glories and sharpness. As the swords hummed, they flew up one by one and slowly circled in the air. It was as if 10,000 swords were resonating with each other, emitting a dazzling light. The sharpness and sharpness of the swords that belonged to metal spread out. It was vast and mighty, filling the surroundings and rushing towards him. With a single breath, Chu Mu felt as if countless swords of qi had entered his nostrils and were constantly cutting. Even his lungs were filled with sharp sword qi, giving off a strange feeling. Gold. Concept of gold. Sharpness. Sharpness. All sorts of comprehensions appeared in his mind. These were all comprehensions of the concept of gold. At the start, Chu Mu had comprehended the concept of gold by comprehending the azure edge sword sex azure edge sword steel. Afterwards, he had cultivated the azure edge sword technique. When he had cultivated the azure edge sword technique to the level of Desheng, he had deepened his comprehension, causing the concept of gold to reach 10%. In the following period of time, basically every day, Chu Mu would take out a bit of time to comprehend the metal concept. However, because it was a third type of concept, his comprehension speed was extremely slow. After half a year, he had only increased a bit, going from 10% to 11%. But now, Chu Mu had once again entered a deep state of comprehension. The various mysteries of the concept of gold once again appeared in his soul, being comprehended by him bit by bit. Unknowingly, the subtleties of the concept of gold were slowly being grasped by Chu Mu. All the swords in the gold sword tomb were emitting a golden luster. A terrifying sharpness hovered in the surroundings. If a weaker swordsman were to enter this place, they would definitely collapse under this sharpness. They would not be able to withstand it at all. Chu Mu stood motionless. Countless sword light were reflected in his eyes. His pupils seemed to be filled with a faint layer of golden light. It was like a flowing waterfall, bringing with it an endless sharpness that could cut through everything. It was unstoppable. Suddenly, he drew his sword and displayed his sword technique. Metal-type sword art. Chu Mu only cultivated the golden edge sword art. Although it was only one, the golden edge sword art's power was extremely powerful. It was one of the top-ranked sword arts. Out of the 13 forms of the golden edge sword technique, Chu Mu started from the first form and displayed one form after another. The fake clear wind sword was covered with a faint layer of golden luster. It let out a buzzing sound, gradually forming a resonance with the 10,000 swords hovering in the surroundings. It was like a conversation between swords. Every move of the gold sword technique left behind a faint needle-like golden light in the air. Each of the needle-like golden light was extremely sharp, wrapping around Chu Mu. As the gold sword technique was displayed, more and more needle-like golden light surrounded Chu Mu. Each of them flew and hovered, cutting in all directions. Chu Mu did not notice it at all. He was completely immersed in the comprehension of the concept of gold, unable to extricate himself. Shio! 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 The sound of the air being torn apart rang out in the gold sword tomb. In the resonance of the 10,000 swords, it was as if they were all guided by Chu Mu. One after another, the swords began to dance. A jaw-dropping scene appeared. One after another, the swords seemed to suddenly be filled with intelligence and spirituality. They actually began to display sword techniques. Moreover, it was the gold sword technique. Every sword, no matter if it was complete or incomplete, was wrapped in a layer of golden luster. They looked like treasured swords. The gold sword technique displayed was incomparably skillful. Chu Mu did not feel anything at all. He was completely immersed in comprehension. He subconsciously cultivated the gold sword technique, using it as a medium for comprehension. Otherwise, if he saw this strange scene in front of him, who knew how shocked he would be? He would definitely be dumbfounded and shocked. The 10,000 swords that were not used by anyone were actually automatically cultivating the gold sword technique. Time slowly passed. Chu Mu was still immersed in cultivation. The guardian elder thought for a moment and ultimately decided not to report it to the palace master. Instead, he planned on waiting for Chu Mu to come out before advising him to just focus on comprehending the wind concept and cloud concept. Under no circumstances should he try to comprehend the third concept. Not only would it be incomparably difficult, it would also slow down his own progress. Metal is one of the 5 elements. It is an extremely sharp existence. When it reaches the extreme, it can cut through everything. Nothing can stop it. Chu Mu muttered to himself as he displayed the gold sword technique. Unknowingly, his gold sword technique had a sense of transcendence. It seemed that perfect sword technique wasn't the limit. Above perfect, there was an even more profound realm. It was just that Chu Mu didn't know about it yet. Brother Long, you have to help me teach that cold-faced man a lesson. How dare he say that my swift swallow sword technique is not good enough? In the first sword tower, Huang Fu Fian snorted and said, "My swift swallow sword technique has already been cultivated to perfection." Huang Fu Shenlong only smiled slightly, but he was a little surprised. He knew the power of the swift swallow sword technique. It was only slightly inferior to the furious dragon sword technique that he had cultivated. It was very profound and powerful among the advanced sword techniques. It could be said that it was one of the top sword techniques. Moreover, no matter if it was the furious dragon sword technique or the swift swallow sword technique, only the royal family had them. Ordinary royal family members were not qualified to come into contact with them. This way, it eliminated the possibility that Chu Mu had already seen the small flying swallow sword technique, let alone practiced it. This was what shocked Huang Fu Shenlong the most. As an important member of the royal family, he had heard that there was a kind of person in the world who had extraordinary talent and extraordinary eyesight. They could easily see through the truth and falsehood. Could it be that Chu Mu was such a person with such a special ability? Was that why he could see through the truth of Huang Fu Fian's swift swallow sword technique? In fact, he had overestimated it. Chu Mu only knew that Huang Fu Fian would have a killer move after using the swift swallow sweeping wave. It was purely his intuition as a sword grandmaster. It was this ability that allowed him to react quickly and block the prelude of the killer move in time, preventing the killer move from being executed. But no matter what, Huang Fu Shenlong valued this ability greatly. Maybe I should get in touch with this person. It would be best if I could fight him, Huang Fu Shenlong said to himself. In the blink of an eye, 10 hours had passed. Chu Mu, who was in the gold sword tomb, gradually woke up. The 10,000 swords suddenly paused and fell to the ground, returning to their original state. I have comprehended something, but the progress is slow. It's not even 12%. Chu Mu sighed after sensing it carefully. He took out the sword token and left the gold sword tomb. How is it? The third will is very difficult to comprehend. The guardian elder hurried over and said, "You should listen to this old man's advice. Don't waste your precious time on comprehending the third will. As long as you focus on raising the wind and cloud dual wills to 30%, then raise your cultivation to the peak and make sufficient preparations to break through to the Qi transformation realm. At that time, you might even be able to raise the wind and cloud dual wills to 40%, greatly increasing its power. Moreover, although 2 wills are inferior to 3 wills, the wind and cloud wills can be fused together. The combined power is more than 2 times stronger than a single will. It is very frightening. Fusion of wills." Chu Mu's heart skipped a beat. He felt as if a door had opened in front of his eyes. That's right, fusion of wills. When you break through to the Qi transformation realm and become an inner palace disciple, you will be able to find books on fusion of wills in the hidden art pavilion. At that time, you will be able to understand it in detail. The guardian elder had a profound expression as he spoke. In reality, it wasn't that he didn't want to give pointers to Chu Mu, but that he himself had only comprehended one type of realm. As for the merging of realms, he had only heard rumors. "Thank you, elder, for your guidance. I will take my leave first." Chu Mu saluted with his sword. It's good that you can think it through." The guardian elder nodded with a gratified expression. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 196. Fusion of Intents. Chu Mu pondered as he walked towards the 5th tower. He had never thought that different intents could be fused together to unleash even more terrifying power. On one hand, it was because he was not strong enough and did not have enough experience. After all, the world was too vast and contained endless mysteries. No one would be able to comprehend them all in their lifetime. On the other hand, Chumu was only a very ordinary member of the ancient Sword Continent. He had just taken the first step and had just started walking on the path. He was still very far away from his goal. On the other hand, it was also because of his foundation. Whether it was the Chu family or the Azure Edge sword sect, their foundations were very shallow. It was also because of this that Chumu was clearly lacking in knowledge and experience. He could not be compared to those high-grade sword sections. On the other hand, it was because his understanding of intents was not deep enough. Above small success was Deshang and perfection. Once one's comprehension of intents reached a certain level, they would naturally experience the fusion of intents. In any case, the advice of the guardian elder of the sacred ground allowed Chumu to understand the fusion of intents in advance. This was equivalent to opening a new door for Chumu. A whole new world appeared before Chumu's eyes. "Hey, cold-faced man, stop right there." Just as Chumu entered the seal, a delicate voice came from not far behind him. Looking back, it was Huang Fufian. Chumu ignored her and walked into the tower. "Humph, cold-faced man, you'd better remember this. How dare you ignore me?" Huang Fufian waved her fist at Chumu's back and curled her lips, revealing 2 small canine teeth as she threatened him. Returning to the second floor, Chumu focused on the fusion of intents. After a few hours, he felt exhausted and dizzy, but he did not gain anything. He knew that this was because he did not have enough comprehension of intents. On the other hand, he did not have the correct method. Comprehending intents was already difficult, so the fusion of intents would be even more difficult. "What? You still want to enter the Golden Sword Tomb?" "No, absolutely not," the guardian elder exclaimed, his face turning ugly. Originally, he thought that his advice yesterday had made Chumu change his mind, but he did not expect that today Chumu still wanted to enter the Golden Sword Tomb, stubbornly clinging to his own course. "Elder, actually, I've already comprehended the concept of metal." The guardian elder's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. His eyes were filled with anger. As a powerful swordsman, his sincere advice had been ignored. His good intentions had been treated as malice. In addition, this elder had helped Chumu understand the fusion of intents earlier. Strictly speaking, Chumu was indebted to the elder for giving him pointers, so Chumu didn't intend to hide it. Moreover, looking at the situation, it seemed that this elder would not agree to let Chumu enter the Golden Sword Tomb. As he spoke, Chumu released the wave of gold concept. Gold concept. The guardian elder's eyes bulged as he pointed at Chumu. His words became stuttering as he was extremely shocked. Although he was at the Chi High Realm and had seen a lot, the guardian elder still took a while to regain his composure. His face was still filled with disbelief. "So, you have comprehended the 3 intents of wind, cloud, and gold?" the guardian elder asked to confirm again. "Yes." Chumu nodded. 3, is there no 4th? The guardian elder did not know what he was talking about at this moment. "Right now there are indeed 3, Chumu said, but he secretly wondered if there would be 1 or 2 more in the future. It was still unknown. Inconceivable, truly inconceivable, the guardian elder muttered to himself, and his tone contained an indescribable desolation. "I've lived for a few tens of years, and I've once traversed the entire Kuan dynasty, yet I know of very few sword practitioners that have comprehended 2 concepts, let alone 3. Chumu did not answer. "As far as I know, in the entire Kuan dynasty, there is only 1 person who has comprehended 3 intents." As if he was immersed in his memories, the guardian elder's tone became erratic. 60 years ago, the Kuan dynasty was the world of that person. No one could surpass him. The geniuses of that era were all overshadowed by him and were reduced to a background. Chu Mu was shocked. Elder, what is that person's name? Having comprehended 3 intents, Chu Mu could understand the difficulty of improving. If it was not for the soul fusion, just 2 intents would be enough for him, not to mention 3. Therefore, he had a heartfelt admiration for the person who was able to comprehend 3 intents 60 years ago. Name. The guardian elder seemed to have regained his consciousness. His whole body shook and his expression changed. His eyes were filled with fear. I can't say it, I can't say it. That person's name is Taboo. I can't say it. The elder's reaction shocked Chu Mu. He instinctively felt that something terrifying must have happened 60 years ago for the elder to have such a reaction. A little curiosity arose in his heart. Chu Mu, let me tell you, it doesn't matter if you're curious or not. In short, you must bury this matter in the depths of your heart. Unless you have sufficient strength, this is a taboo that cannot be touched. Knowing it now won't do any good. On the contrary, it might bring you unnecessary trouble and even endanger your life. The elder's expression was extremely solemn as he warned. Chu Mu nodded. He could feel the seriousness in the elder's tone. All right, you have comprehended 3 intents. In the entire sword mansion, you can be said to be unique. It is enough to allow your strength to surpass sword practitioners of the same level by a lot. The elder's tone changed and he continued, but at the same time it will also create a great burden for you. It will consume even more of your time. I hope you can make good use of it. I understand, Chu Mu said. He thought for a moment. Elder, I have a request. What request? The elder asked. Elder, I hope that you can keep the fact that I have comprehended 3 intents a secret. Chu Mu said. The elder was stunned for a moment before he nodded. All right, I can keep it a secret for you now, but I can't guarantee it forever. Thank you, elder, Chu Mu said. The elder handed the sword token to Chu Mu. Chu Mu took the sword token and walked through the light door. He once again arrived at the golden sword tomb to comprehend the metal intent realm. 3 intents. Moreover, the wind intent realm and the cloud intent realm can complement each other. Once it matures, it might be comparable to the person from 60 years ago. It might even surpass him. The guardian elder muttered to himself. His expression changed several times before he shook his head. No, that person is too terrifying. He is unfathomable. Others will never know how powerful he is. It is impossible to surpass him. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 197. The pseudo-clear wind sword pierced out, and a needle-like golden light pierced through the void. Tens of thousands of sword cries reverberated in the air. Chu Mu withdrew his sword. When he opened his eyes, a sharp golden light flashed through his eyes, and it was even denser than before. Taking out the sword token, Chu Mu left the golden sword tomb and returned the token to the guardian elder. Chu Mu, how's your comprehension of the concept of metal? The guardian elder asked with a smile. Not enough, I need more time. Chu Mu replied, I hope you can obtain a higher ranking in the next small sword pagoda ranking battle and gain more time. The guardian elder smiled. And I'll take my leave first. Chu Mu saluted with his sword and turned to leave. In the past 3 months, Chu Mu had used 10 hours a day. Now that 35 days had passed, all 172 hours had been used up, and Chu Mu's metal concept had increased from the original 11% to 23%. There was an obvious improvement, and the power of the golden edge sword art had also increased. Returning to the 5th sword tower, Chu Mu cultivated the golden edge sword art on the 1st floor. During the 35 days in the golden sword tomb, Chu Mu had been cultivating the golden edge sword art every time. Now he had a feeling that the golden edge sword art was about to transcend. Perfection is not the end of the sword art. There should be a higher level above perfection, but I couldn't touch it in the past. But now, staring at the sword in his hand, bits and pieces of enlightenment emerged in his mind. With a casual stab, a sharp sound broke through the air. The golden light was as bright as a needle, dazzling to the eyes. This was the third style of the golden edge sword art, but it emitted a sense of transcendence, as if it wanted to break through some kind of shackles and cage. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Chu Mu's attacks became increasingly casual and unrestrained. Although there seemed to be no pattern, each of his sword strikes was incomparably sharp, piercing through the air and causing people to feel a chill. In the air, needle-like golden light flickered, as if golden threads were intertwined. Each of the golden threads emitted a terrifying sharpness and sharpness. From then on, Chu Mu focused on comprehending the concept of metal and cultivating the sword art every day. In the blink of an eye, there was less than 10 days before the next small sword pagoda ranking battle. Chu Mu had reached the golden edge, sword art, perfection, and transcendence. Chu Mu had transcendence, and transcendence, and transcendence, transcendence, above perfection, transcendence, and transcendence. As for the metal concept, with the help of the inertia from the metal sword tomb, it broke through once more, reaching 24%. It wasn't far from 30%. Transcendence is transcending of a pinnacle peak of peak. Chu Mu's overall strength had clearly improved again, of night, of a 5 of sect of something. Ouyang Qingya applied to issue a challenge to Huangfu Shenglong from the Hall of Hundred Affairs, the third on the Iron Sword ranking against the first. Everyone in the outer house was alarmed. Even the house master was paying close attention. Huangfu Shenglong had been the first on the Iron Sword ranking for a long time, while Ouyang of Tu had been in the third for a long time. The arena outside the 100 Hall was bustling with noise and excitement. All the students had gathered there, waiting for the battle to begin, the first against the third. Chu Mu had also arrived. He stared at the empty arena and thought to himself, Huangfu Shenglong and Ouyang of Tu haven't fought for a long time. This time, it will definitely be an exciting battle. Strange. There are only 5 days left before the small sword pagoda ranking battle. Why didn't Ouyang of Tu wait until after the ranking battle to challenge Huangfu Shenglong? Who knows? Anyway, it's none of our business. We're only responsible for watching. Suddenly, a strong aura came from afar. Then, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. A figure flew over like a ghost at an extremely fast speed. With a whoosh, a figure passed by the crowd and landed on the arena. It was Ouyang of Tu in a black robe. There were red patterns on his robe, making him look demonic. Once he appeared, Ouyang of Tu became the focus of everyone's attention. He stood proudly on the arena, his eyes shining with a sharp light. His aura fluctuated, and his temperament gave people a sense of evil charm. Coupled with his handsome face that made people jealous, he instantly became the Prince Charming in the hearts of the thousands of female swordsmen. Humph! This pretty boy dares to challenge Brother Shenglong. He's asking for it. Huangfu Fian shook her head and said with disdain, Ouyang of Tu wouldn't do something like this if he wasn't confident, Huangfu Kuang said. At this moment, a majestic aura came over, startling the crowd. They all turned around and hurriedly opened a path for Huangfu Shenglong to pass through. Huangfu Shenglong walked over with a long sword at his waist. He didn't use any movement skills, but there was a majestic aura around him. It was like a tidal wave. He was like a king and overlord. As soon as he appeared, his powerful aura suppressed everyone present. Ouyang of Tu frowned, and there was a trace of darkness in his eyes. Huangfu Shenglong had stolen his limelight the moment he appeared. This feeling made him very unhappy. Huangfu Shenglong was neither fast nor slow, like a king patrolling. With every step he took, he walked towards the sword battle arena. The aura around his body became more and more majestic and condensed. His aura was like a surging tide, and one could vaguely hear the sound of waves. When he reached the bottom of the arena, Huangfu Shenglong jumped lightly. His whole body was pushed up by the waves and landed on the arena. "You're not my opponent. Why are you wasting your time?" Huangfu Shenglong looked at Ouyang of Tu and said indifferently. His tone was overbearing. "Humph, I wasn't your opponent before, but now that might not be the case." Ouyang of Tu opened his arms and snorted. A strange smile flashed across his handsome face, and a faintly discernible darkness filled the surroundings. "Looks like you've already comprehended 30% of the darkness mentality." Huangfu Shenglong's eyes flashed with surprise, but his tone was still as indifferent as before. "That's right. I've already comprehended 30% of the darkness mentality. I'll let you have a taste of the power of 30% of the darkness mentality." Ouyang of Tu smiled and pulled out the sword at his waist. This fake sword was completely black. It was 3 fingers wide, but it was very thin. It was emitting a faint black luster. "Make your move." Huangfu Shenglong didn't move. His indifferent tone made Ouyang of Tu's eyes twitch. Shortly after, he slashed out with his sword. A black sword chi tore through the air, emitting a sharp whistling sound as it slashed towards Huangfu Shenglong. Huangfu Shenglong instantly unsheathed his sword. The sword was like a raging flood dragon. It let out a roar and shattered the black sword chi. Moreover, a light blue sword chi penetrated the void and rushed towards Ouyang Qingya like a small flood dragon. Ouyang of Tu's body flickered like a ghost. He dodged the sword chi and appeared beside Huangfu Shenglong. He counterattacked with his sword, rolling up a darkness. The dark sword chi and dark sword arts that he cultivated were also of the darkness mentality. They complemented each other and were extremely powerful. Huangfu Shenglong seemed like he was about to be devoured by the darkness. With a low roar, the fake raging dragon sword was like a raging dragon emerging from the sea. Its majestic aura was vast and surging like a huge wave. It instantly shattered the darkness that was enveloping him. Ouyang of Tu's expression didn't change. As he retreated, he slashed out with his fake sword. Streaks of black sword chi intertwined into a sword net that almost covered the entire arena. "Break for me." The roar was like the anger of a king. The fake sword in Huangfu Shenglong's hand emitted a light blue light. It was like a surging wave. He slashed out with his sword. The resplendent light blue sword chi seemed to have materialized. It crushed the black sword net in a crushing manner. So powerful! Chu Mu was secretly surprised. Whether it was Ouyang of Tu or Huangfu Shenglong, both of them had their own means and were very powerful. Moreover, Chu Mu felt that the 2 of them hadn't used their full strength yet. The current battle was just a test or a warm-up. The black sword chi and the light blue sword chi constantly slashed out and collided with each other. The entire sword battle arena was completely filled with the 2 types of sword chi. The terrifying shockwaves splashed out and shot into the ground below the sword battle arena, creating craters and sending rocks flying everywhere. The sword chi of the 2 had already reached the peak of the half-step chi transformation realm. Moreover, the sword chi they cultivated was also very profound. Their sword chi was incomparably pure and powerful, and its power was extremely terrifying. The spectators below the arena were all dumbfounded. They were deeply shocked by the fierce battle in front of them. They all thought that if they were the ones fighting against the 2 on the arena, they probably wouldn't even be able to withstand a single sword strike and would be killed instantly. The sturdy arena was shattered one after another. Under the collision of the sword chi, cracks spread out in all directions. Huangfu Shenglong's and Ouyang of Tu's swords collided. The air shattered, and an ear-piercing sound erupted. The sparks were as resplendent as fireworks. Ouyang of Tu's figure was like a ghost. It was silent and very sudden. Huangfu Xinglong's figure was filled with power. It was like a flood dragon breaking through the water and crushing everything. I didn't expect the gigolo to become so strong, Huangfu Fian said with some indignation. Huangfu Kuang's face was somewhat serious. His eyes were wide open and filled with battle intent. This kind of clash was what he liked the most. Huangfu Kuang subconsciously looked at Chu Mu. I wonder how strong this guy is. Can he be comparable to the two of them? On the other hand, Qin Shi, who was ranked second, had a calm expression. This kind of clash was nothing in her eyes. The two of them hadn't shown their true strength yet. Ouyang of Tu leaped into the air and dove down. His black sword seemed to have disappeared into the air, leaving behind countless black sword shadows. They covered the sky and covered the earth, enveloping Huangfu Shenglong. Huangfu Shenglong seemed to have been swallowed up again. A strange killing intent was hidden deep in the darkness. It was like a venomous snake in the corner waiting for an opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. Huangfu Xinglong's eyes widened. It was as if he could see through the darkness. His sword pierced the sky. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 198. Shatter. Ouyang Qinye flew back in the air, facing each other with a distance of more than 10 meters. Next, I will perform the dark snake sword art with 30% of the concept of darkness. After defeating you, I will break through to the Qi transformation realm. Ouyang Qinye said. His black hair danced wildly as if it had broken free from its shackles, like countless dark snakes rushing towards the sky. His pupils became dark and deep, and even the whites of his eyes seemed to be suffused with traces of black, making him look even more demonic. Around his body, traces of darkness spread out, wriggling like small dark snakes. This aura was extremely shocking. Concept of darkness. Chu Mu carefully sensed it. Among the different mentalities, the 5 elements mentalities are the most common. The other wind mentalities and thunder mentalities are also more common, while the ice mentalities are rarer. For example, the light mentalities and the dark mentalities are even rarer than the ice mentalities. Just like the power mentalities, they all have a power that surpasses the normal mentalities. In other words, the power of 30% of the concept of darkness was actually above the 30% of the concept of wind. With a rumbling sound, Huangfu Shenglong also performed the concept of water. His pupils turned light red, and a light blue current surrounded his body. It was like a small flood dragon that was about to overturn the sea. It also seemed like waves of surging waves. 30% of the concept of water. Ouyang Qinye's eyes flashed with a strange light. Unfortunately, the concept of darkness is more powerful than the concept of water at the same level. Show me your full strength, Huangfu Shenglong. With just mentalities, you are not my opponent. When it's time to use my full strength, I will. Huangfu Shenglong's expression did not change, and his tone was indifferent. Ouyang Qinye did not speak, but the aura around his body became sharper. It was dark and gloomy, as if it was about to absorb the light. Immediately his sword stabbed out. It was like a hidden snake shooting out. It was as fast as lightning, and everyone could only see a trace of black in front of their eyes. A snake will always be a snake. How can it be the opponent of a flood dragon? With a low roar, Huangfu Shenglong's sword seemed to have turned into a flood dragon, breaking out of the water and clashing with the dark snake. Humph, you're talking about an ordinary snake. A dark snake is not inferior to a flood dragon, Ouyang Qinye retorted. Not only was he not at a disadvantage in terms of momentum, he was also not at a disadvantage in terms of words. The dark snake sword art was one of the top sword arts among the high-level sword arts. Its basic form was like a dark snake. Not only was it as fast as lightning, but it was also very quiet. It was very strange and hard to guard against. Raging Flood Dragon Sword Technique was ranked at the top among high-grade sword techniques. Its basic moves were like numerous raging flood dragons, possessing a vast and domineering power, as if wanting to crush everything. In the eyes of the crowd, it was as if dragons and dark snakes were spreading across the void and colliding with each other. The flood dragon roared angrily, but the dark snake was strangely silent. The audience held their breaths and stared with their eyes wide open, afraid that they would miss any detail. It was rare to see such a battle between experts, especially when two high-level sword arts clashed. They could not miss it. Maybe they could learn something from it and improve their sword arts attainments. Both Ouyang Qingye and Huangfu Shenglong had already cultivated the dark snake sword art and raging flood dragon sword technique to perfection. Every sword attack was able to fully display the essence and power of the two sword arts. In front of the crowd, Ouyang Qingye and Huangfu Shenglong seemed to have disappeared. Only a flood dragon and a dark snake were left fighting on the battle stage. The roars of the flood dragon and the hisses of the dark snake rose and fell one after another. The dark snake's body was surrounded by countless black flames, as if it was burning. Suddenly, the flames expanded and exploded, increasing the size of the dark snake by 2 times. It soared into the sky and then swooped down as fast as lightning. It was the killer move of the dark snake sword art, Dark Snake Invasion. The flood dragon let out a roar and dove into the surrounding water. In an instant, it broke through the water and soared into the sky, carrying a tyrannical power and an unparalleled aura as it charged towards the dark snake. It was the killing move of the Furious Flood Dragon sword technique. Furious Flood Dragon Bursting Water. The dark snake and the flood dragon collided, and a terrifying explosion sounded. Black and light blue sword chi splashed in all directions. The flood dragon slapped the dark snake's body with its claw, but the dark snake bit the flood dragon's neck. Its sharp teeth sank into the flood dragon's body. With a sad cry, the flood dragon fell down. The dark snake's body was broken, and its lower body fell down. However, its upper body was still rushing towards Huangfu Shenglong. Lose! Ouyang Qingye merged with the dark snake's upper body and stabbed his sword down. The power of the dark snake sword art was on par with the raging flood dragon sword art, but the mentality of darkness was indeed stronger than the mentality of water. It seemed that Huangfu Shenglong was in danger. Chu Mu's pupils shrank. In the next breath, he would be able to see Huangfu Shenglong's full power. It's still too early for you. Huangfu Shenglong shouted out explosively as a towering aura suddenly surged out from his body. It was like an immovable mountain that could hold up a mountain. There was even a domineering and sharp aura that shook the space, and his entire body seemed to have become 10 times larger. Sword aura! Chu Mu was shocked. His expression changed drastically and he almost cried out. Among all the swordsmen he had met so far, besides himself, only the Sword Pavilion Elder of the Green Edge Sword Sect had comprehended Sword Aura. He did not expect to meet the second person who had comprehended Sword Aura here. Moreover, it was someone who had comprehended Sword Aura below the Chi transformation realm. The diving dark snake paused in midair. In the next breath, the sword aura on Huangfu Shenglong's body surged like water, rushing towards the fake raging flood dragon sword. Chu Mu could clearly feel that the sword aura on Huangfu Shenglong's body had been transferred to the fake raging flood dragon sword. The sword aura was invisible and colorless, but it was majestic and vast. It was like a monstrous wave that contained sharpness and sharpness. It was unstoppable. Under the sword aura, half of the dark snake was completely destroyed. Ouyang Qingye's expression changed drastically. Sword chi gathered in front of him, and he waved his sword. An earth-shattering boom shook the surroundings. The black sword chi was completely shattered. Ouyang Qingye's body was thrown into the air by the huge force. He could not hold onto the fake sword anymore. After landing, he took 3 steps back before he could stop. His face was pale at first, but then it turned into an unhealthy red. His throat squirmed, and it was obvious that he was trying to swallow the blood that he was about to spit out. Huangfu Xinglong's body did not move at all. He stood on the stage like a mountain, pointing his sword at Ouyang Qingye. The sword aura on his body had disappeared, but he still looked powerful. Only Chu Mu could feel the weakness in Huangfu Xinglong's body. "You are not my opponent," Huangfu Xinglong said word by word. Ouyang Qingye's expression suddenly changed. If I knew it, this pretty boy is definitely not Brother Xinglong's opponent. Huangfu Fian laughed happily. Huangfu Kuang did not say anything. He could see that Huangfu Xinglong had already used his full strength in this battle. The sword aura was Huangfu Xinglong's trump card. It would not be easy for him to win. Although Huangfu Xinglong and Ouyang Qingye had both held back, it was still a strand of Xiantian sword qi. Once the Xiantian sword qi was used, it would no longer be a battle of victory, but a battle of life and death. There was no need for that. Ouyang Qingye's expression returned to normal. He picked up the fake sword and sheathed it. "You have won this battle." But only after reaching the Qi transformation realm can one be considered to have stepped into the true world of swordsmen. Our battle has only just begun. As he spoke, Ouyang Qingye walked down the arena and left. His movements seemed to be a little difficult. It was obvious that he had suffered heavy internal injuries. Huangfu Xinglong let out a sigh of relief. A wave of weakness attacked both his mind and body. He wanted to lie down, but he had no choice but to maintain his current state in front of everyone. He wanted to make others think that it was not difficult for him to win. Huangfu Xinglong's sword aura is also at the entry level, which is the same as mine. But in terms of the application of sword aura, he is better than me. On the way back to the 5th sword tower, Chu Mu kept replaying the scene of Huangfu Xinglong condensing his sword aura on the fake sword. That sword aura was extremely powerful. Chu Mu believed that if he were in Huangfu Xinglong's shoes, he would not be able to block it. Unless he used 40% of the wind concept or Xiantian sword qi, he would have to use his sword aura to resist. But obviously his application of sword aura was not as good as Huangfu Xinglong's. Sword aura integrated into the sword and released. Unknowingly, Chu Mu walked into the sword tower. He was still immersed in his thoughts. Chu Mu did not care what kind of posture he was sitting in. In short, he completely ignored everything else. His mind was completely immersed in Huangfu Xinglong's sword. After thinking for a long time, Chu Mu could only stop thinking and empty his mind. He stared at the white clouds in the sky and did not think about anything else. After an unknown period of time, Chu Mu suddenly had an idea. Since it is the application of sword aura, I naturally have to start from the sword aura. Silently muttering, Chu Mu's mind surged with the comprehension of sword force. On his body, a majestic aura, like that of a mountain, naturally rose. Within it contained a shocking sharpness. How can I transfer the sword aura to the sword and use the sword to release the power of the sword aura? Although my sword aura is also at the entry level, it is very passive in its application. It can only be used to intimidate and cannot form an effective attack. But if I gather the sword aura on the sword and release it like Huangfu Xinglong, then I will be able to display the offensive side of the sword aura. And its power is extremely strong. Huangfu Xinglong's sword not only defeated Ouyang Qingye's dark snake attack, but also defeated Ouyang Qingye's sword aura. In the end, it also caused Ouyang Qingye to suffer a serious internal injury. Compared to the furious dragon-breaking water that had integrated 30% of the water essence, it was even more tyrannical. Chu Mu felt that if he could master how to integrate the sword aura into the sword and release it, he would have another trump card. His overall strength would be significantly improved. While others were discussing the battle between Huangfu Xinglong and Ouyang Qingye, Chu stayed in his sword tower and was once again immersed in thinking about the application of sword aura. As soon as Huangfu Shenglong returned to the sword tower, he immediately sat down and breathed a sigh of relief. His face was a little pale. With his current ability, releasing the sword aura to attack was still a little difficult. The burden was too great. Perhaps it would be better if he broke through to the Qi transformation realm. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 199. Chu Mu stood on the first floor of the sword tower with his sword in hand. His sword aura fluctuated as if it wanted to flow to the sword in his hand, but it seemed to be obstructed by something. If I can personally experience the attack of the sword aura, I might be able to understand, Chu Mu thought to himself. He had no choice but to disperse the sword aura. Experiencing it personally was the most direct and effective method. It was many times faster than cultivating behind closed doors. Of course, there was also the possibility of danger. I heard that Huangfu Shenglong is about to break through to the Qi transformation realm and is currently in seclusion to prepare. What a pity. Chu Mu thought to himself. He left the sword tower and headed for the small sword pagoda. A new round of the small sword pagoda ranking battles had begun. This was Chu Mu's third time participating in the small sword pagoda ranking battles after entering the Great Kuin Sword Mansion. He had obtained good rankings in the first 2 times, and each time his ranking was higher than the last. The small sword pagoda was bustling with noise and excitement. Apart from the top 3, everyone else had come here to participate in the small sword pagoda ranking battles. It could be said that Chu Mu had spurred everyone on. Huangfu Fian rolled her eyes and said to Chu Mu, "Hey, cold-faced man, how about we have a competition?" A sly smile appeared on her face. "How do we compete?" Chu Mu faintly smiled and said, "It's very simple. We're going to challenge the small sword pagoda in a bit. Let's compete and see who has a higher ranking wins," Huangfu Fian said with a smile. Huangfu Kuang stood to the side, the corner of his mouth twitching. He didn't say a word. "Sure, but what if I win? So what if I lose?" Chu Mu faintly smiled and said, "It's impossible for me to lose." Huangfu Fian puffed out her chest and said confidently, "That's not necessarily true." Chu Mu said, "Let's talk about the outcome first. If I win, you have to agree to a condition of mine. No matter what it is, you have to comply." Huangfu Fian rolled her eyes and said, "If you win, I will also agree to a condition of yours." "Does that mean I have to comply with all conditions?" Chu Mu asked with a smile. Huangfu Fian seemed to be hesitating. Chu Mu didn't say a word and just looked at Huangfu Fian. Huangfu Fian gritted her teeth and said, "Fine, you win. I can promise you one thing. I'll comply with anything." The corners of Huangfu Kuang's mouth twitched again, but he still didn't say anything. The bet between Chu Mu and Huangfu Fian was only a small interlude. Soon, 100 names appeared on the metal sword ranking. 100 students flew into the small sword pagoda. At the same time, the 100 incense sticks were lit. Among the 100 students, only 3 of them were on the iron sword ranking. These 3 people had persisted for a relatively long time, and each of them had more than 40 incense sticks. Very quickly, the second batch entered the small sword pagoda. This batch did not have anyone on the iron sword ranking, so they could only last until the 35th incense stick. Huangfu Changtian entered the third batch. During this half a year of cultivation, Huangfu Changtian's overall strength had an obvious improvement. However, the others wouldn't fall behind by much. In the end, Huangfu Changtian persisted until the 38th incense stick, which was an improvement compared to the previous time. Lian Qingyan entered the 4th batch. In the end, Lian Qingyan also persisted until the 38th incense stick. It could be said that Huangfu Changtian was neck and neck. The two of them seemed to be fated opponents. After that, Sun Changfeng, Huangfu Bingning, Gao Guling, Nangong Haoyang, and the others also had some improvement, but it wasn't especially obvious. Luo Yufeng felt that after a period of cultivation, his overall strength had improved quite a bit. Thus, he had the idea of testing himself and signed up to participate in the Small Sword Pagodas Challenge. In the end, he persisted for 2 more incense sticks than the first time. In terms of strength, he had indeed improved. Xia Donghua, who was defeated by Chu Mu, also participated, but his improvement was only a little. As for Han Ao, he also participated, but there was almost no improvement. Han Ao kept staring at Chu Mu, thinking about how to get Chu Mu to join the proud sword gang. He increasingly felt that if Chu Mu joined, the proud sword gang would definitely become very powerful in the future. Batch after batch of students entered the Small Sword Pagoda to challenge. Although the Small Sword Pagoda's challenge method had never changed, many people had already participated several times. However, this experience only allowed them to deal with it more freely in the beginning. Once they reached the end, when the enemies became stronger and more numerous, they wouldn't be able to deal with it. Everything still depended on one's own strength. As long as one's strength was sufficient, they would be able to sweep through everything. After another batch, Huangfu Fian's name instantly appeared on the metal sword leaderboard. "Cold-faced man, it's my turn. Watch carefully." Huangfu Fian raised her fist and waved it in front of Chu Mu. With a flash, her figure nimbly landed in front of the Small Sword Pagoda like a swallow. "Brother Chu, let me tell you something. The bet with little Fian is the most unreliable." Huangfu Kuang took advantage of the opportunity when Huangfu Fian entered the Small Sword Pagoda to approach Chu Mu and whisper, as if he was afraid that Huangfu Fian would hear him. "Why?" Chu Mu was a little puzzled. "Because if she wins, she'll definitely think of strange conditions to make things difficult for you, and you won't know whether to laugh or cry. But if she loses, she'll play dumb and think of all sorts of excuses and methods to delay until nothing is settled." Huangfu Kuang spoke with an extremely emotional expression as if he had suffered greatly. Chu Mu only smiled and didn't take it to heart. In fact, he had a general idea of Huangfu Fian's strength after a short fight with her. If it was a ranking battle in the Small Sword Pagoda, Chu Mu was 100% confident that he could beat her. Even if Huangfu Fian reneged on the bet after losing, Chu Mu didn't care. This was originally just a small fun process, and he didn't care about the result. "Brother Chu, please don't tell anyone that I told you this. Otherwise, if little Fian finds out, I will definitely be in big trouble," Huangfu Kuang warned. Chu Mu nodded. Inside the Small Sword Pagoda, Huangfu Fian, who had just killed a powerful enemy, suddenly felt her nose itch and couldn't help but sneeze. "It must be that big guy talking bad about me. When I get out, I have to force him to tell me what he said." Huangfu Fian muttered to herself. Her figure moved like a swallow, dodging the enemy's attack and counterattacking like a swallow. The time burned one by one, students were ejected. In the end, only Huangfu Fian was left fighting inside. The time had already burned to the 60th section. Last time, little Fian lasted until the 88th section. She didn't participate several times. Her strength is much stronger than before. Maybe this time, she can last until the 90th section. That way, her ranking will definitely be higher, Huangfu Kuang said. "Oh, how many sections did Huangfu Shenglong last?" Chu Mu suddenly asked. "Last time, Big Brother Shenglong lasted for 94 sections. If he comes again, he can definitely last until the 95th section," Huangfu Kuang said with certainty. Chu Mu nodded thoughtfully. "Right, according to what you know, what's the record for the longest section?" It said that someone lasted until the 99th section. That seems to be the highest record. Huangfu Kuang thought for a moment and said, "However, the 99th section is too difficult. I feel that even the current Big Brother Shenglong can't do it. After all, the further you go, the more powerful the enemies will be. The slightest carelessness will cause you to lose." N. Chu-mu nodded. At this time, the time had already burned to the 91st section. A figure was ejected and safely landed on the ground. In a flash, she appeared in front of Chu-mu, her face full of pride. Huang Fu-Fian raised her fist and said, "What do you think, cold-faced man? I lasted for 91 incense sticks, even more than the pretty boy. This time, I can at least move up a rank. You should admit defeat as soon as possible." "You're the one who has to admit defeat." Chu-mu smiled. "Then I'll wait." Huang Fu-Fian snorted and stood to the side. Her eyes darted around as if she was thinking of something. After another 2 batches, Chu-mu's ranking appeared on the Iron Sword leaderboard. "If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 200. Brother Chu, let's see who can last the longest in the small sword pagoda. How about it? Huang Fu-Quang grinned as he looked at his name on the Iron Sword ranking. This guy was quite scheming. He knew that although Chu-mu's ranking wasn't low in the previous 2 small sword pagoda ranking battles, he didn't last long in the time incense. At least, compared to those with similar rankings, there was a huge difference. He didn't have the confidence to surpass Chu-mu in terms of ranking, so he proposed an alternative method. How do we determine victory or defeat? Chu-mu asked. Victory or defeat? Huang Fu-Quang was startled. He proposed this competition on a whim and didn't think of anything else. He couldn't answer for a moment. "If you win, I'll call you Big Brother. If you lose, you'll have to call me Big Brother," Huang Fu-Quang said. "Okay." Chu-mu nodded. The 2 entered the small sword pagoda and began the challenge. The reason why I didn't last long in the first 2 small sword pagoda ranking battles was because my killing speed was too fast. But this time I can slow down my killing speed and use these enemies to practice my sword arts. After entering the pagoda, Chu-mu took advantage of the fact that the enemies had yet to appear and thought to himself. Soon the first enemy appeared. He only had the cultivation of peak 10th phase sword chi. Chu-mu casually swung his sword and a needle-like golden light pierced through the air. Before the enemy could react, a bloody hole appeared on his neck and he dissipated. Too weak. The second enemy appeared and was killed with a single strike. Although Chu-mu had already slowed down his killing speed, the enemies that appeared before him were too weak. They couldn't block a casual strike from Chu-mu. Chu-mu drew his sword and used Golden Edge Sword Technique's basic move. His Golden Edge Sword Technique was currently between perfection and transcendence. Thus, every strike was very casual and easy. In the spotlessly white room, there wasn't even a drop of blood on the ground. Every enemy that appeared died under Chu-mu's casual strike. The only thing that could be seen was a needle-like golden light piercing through the air. Moreover, the enemy's throat or forehead were immediately pierced through and died. Not even a drop of blood was spilled. Compared to when he had just entered the outer palace, Chu-mu's strength had increased by at least several times. The current him could kill the Chu-mu of half a year ago with a single sword strike. Without moving his body, Zhang Xian thrust out his sword once more. A golden light pierced through the air, and the half-step Qi transformation realm cultivator died before he could even react. A gust of wind came from behind. Chu-mu stepped aside to avoid the attack. Without even turning his head, he swung his sword back. A thin golden light cut through the opponent's throat, killing him in one strike. More and more enemies died under Chu-mu's sword. Finally, a stream of blood flew out and splattered on the white wall like scarlet ink. It was a ghastly sight. Chu-mu no longer killed his enemies with a single strike because it had become very difficult to do so now. He continued to display the basic moves of the gold-edged sword art, and Chu-mu carefully sensed and comprehended them, alternating between the phantom step and wind walk. His figure became unpredictable and hard to catch. The pseudo-clear wind sword was incomparably sharp. Every strike would leave behind a thin golden light, emitting an astonishing sharpness. In the blink of an eye, the 51st incense stick had been burned. I wonder how many incense sticks Chu-Mu will be able to last this time. Some people began to whisper. The first time he lasted 39 incense sticks. The second time he lasted 50 incense sticks. According to his progress, he should be able to last until the 60th incense stick. But it's hard to say how high he'll rank in the end. Maybe he'll be able to move up 1 or 2 ranks. Someone analyzed seriously. Even he felt that it was very reasonable and nodded repeatedly. Didn't you hear Huang Fu Kuang's suggestion? I think this time, Chu-Mu definitely won't leave the small sword pagoda so quickly. He'll definitely be able to last longer, at least 80 incense sticks. If you don't believe me, let's make a bet. Let's make a bet. I bet that Chu-Mu can last for 90 incense sticks. You despicable. I should be the one who bet that Chu-Mu can last for 90 incense sticks. Are you stupid? Chu-Mu is so strong. If he really wants to, he can definitely last for 90 incense sticks. Do you want to bet? Bet, why wouldn't I? I bet that Chu-Mu can last for 91 incense sticks. F***CK, what kind of bet is this? Why do you care? Do you want to bet or not? I'd be stupid to bet with you. Time flew by. Soon it was the 60th incense stick. Now 90 people had been sent out. There were still 10 people fighting in the small sword pagoda. When the 70th incense stick was lit, there were still 4 people fighting in the small sword pagoda. When the 80th incense stick was lit, there were still 2 people fighting in the small sword pagoda. It was Chu-Mu and Huang Fu Kuang. In the room that had turned scarlet again, 10 strong enemies were attacking Chu-Mu from all directions. These 10 strong enemies were not only at the peak of the half-step Qi transformation stage, but they had also cultivated their swordsmanship to perfection. Moreover, they had all comprehended 29% of the sword intent. They had also cultivated their high-level movement techniques to perfection. Although they couldn't speak and didn't have much intelligence, they had extremely strong battle instincts. They knew how to eliminate all unnecessary movements. Every move they made was the most direct, concise, and effective attack. Chu-Mu was under great pressure. He could no longer use the basic moves of the gold-tip swordsmanship with ease. He had no choice but to use his killing moves to counterattack. Gold-tip sundering the sky, cloud-shattering sword explosion, gale shaking the forest. Using it consecutively and combining it with the perfect phantom step, Chu-Mu was finally able to defeat these 10 powerful enemies. But before he could breathe a sigh of relief, another 10 strong enemies appeared and attacked him with their swords. With the increase in pressure, Chu-Mu's heart skipped a beat. He immediately took out a second fake sword from the space bracelet and held it in his left hand. After a long period of trial and error, Chu-Mu had cultivated the dual swordsmanship to the small success stage yesterday. The small success stage of the dual swordsmanship was already able to increase his strength. He used the gold-tip swordsmanship in both his left and right hands. They turned into 2 thin golden rays that pierced through the air. The hallmark of the small success stage of the dual swordsmanship was to be able to use the same swordsmanship. For example, stabbing with both hands would not feel awkward and would not lose sight of the other. On the contrary, it would be like stabbing with one hand. It would be as if 2 people of the same mind were stabbing with their swords. When the dual swordsmanship was further consolidated at the small success stage, one would be able to use the same swordsmanship with both swords. Chu-Mu had only just reached the small success stage. When using both swords, he could only use the same basic move. Even so, Chu-Mu's strength had increased by at least 20%. He blocked an attack with one sword and slashed out diagonally, instantly killing a strong enemy. He turned around and used his sword to block another attack. Then he used his defensive sword to counterattack. The dual swordsmanship was not a swordsmanship. It did not have any specific moves. Instead, it was an application of swordsmanship. The moves were completely based on other swordsmanships. It could be said that the dual swordsmanship was a secret technique. However, once this secret technique was successfully cultivated, it would not cause any burden. As the strong enemies surrounded him, Chu-Mu turned around and used both swords at almost the same time to use the killer move. Sky-splitting golden edge. Two needle-like golden rays followed Chu-Mu's body and formed a circle with golden edges. They disappeared into the void and cut through the bodies of the strong enemies. All of them were cut in half at the waist. Chapter 90. Incense burning Huang Fufian stared at the time and then at the small sword pagoda. Her heart almost jumped out of her chest as she clenched her fists. Come out, come out. Little Mouth kept muttering, hoping that Chu-Mu would be ejected quickly. Kill. The two swords clashed. Two needle-like golden rays formed a cross and killed 4 strong enemies. He turned around and used backstab. With a light tap of his foot, he leaped into the air and dove down from above. The 2 swords slashed out like lightning. Actual combat was the best way to improve. Through a continuous stream of powerful enemies, Chu-Mu's dual sword technique attainments were constantly becoming more and more profound. It had already gone from the initial small success stage to the true small success stage. He wasn't far from being able to use the same sword technique with different basic forms at will. Like a fish in water, with 2 swords in hand, he was invincible. With 1 sword for defense and 1 sword for attack, he alternated between attack and defense with great agility. Sometimes he would use both swords at the same time to instantly kill the strong enemies. Chapter 91. Incense burning. Humph. You're lucky you're not stupid. Otherwise, you'd lose miserably if you bet with me. An old student who almost lost to Chu-Mu laughed proudly. Then do you think Chu-Mu can last until the 90 or so incense sticks? Another old student retorted, unwilling to admit defeat. It's over, it's over. I'm going to lose this time. Huang Fufian's face was filled with anxiety. She was so anxious that she stomped her feet. She kept looking at the time incense and found that it was almost finished. In terms of length of time, Chu-Mu had already surpassed her. At this moment, a figure was ejected and landed safely. He's out, he's finally out. Even if he lasted a bit longer, his ranking might not be higher than mine. Huang Fufian let out a sigh of relief. Soon after, her face stiffened because the person who came out wasn't Chu-Mu, but Huang Fuquang. Whatever, I didn't say anything. Huang Fufian's expression kept changing. She was hesitant. She wanted to stay and see how many incense sticks Chu-Mu could last. But she also wanted to leave quickly and renege on her promise. In the end, her habit of reneging defeated her curiosity. Huang Fufian ran away like a wisp of smoke. Huang Fuquang happened to look over and was stunned for a moment. He then smiled bitterly. As expected, the 92nd incense stick burned, but Chu-Mu still hadn't come out. Everyone held their breaths. They felt that 1 incense stick's time was as long as a year. The 93rd incense stick burned. The 94th incense stick burned. Could it be that Chu-Mu wants to take first place in one go? A voice voiced out everyone's thoughts. The 94th incense stick is almost finished. The 95th incense stick. He's already surpassed Huang Fu Xinglong's record. The 96th incense stick. Legend has it that the highest record is 99 incense sticks. Could it be that he's aiming for the highest record? Everyone couldn't calm down. All kinds of discussions rose and fell. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 201. The 2 swords danced in the air like a bolt of lightning. This swift and violent attack instantly killed the last enemy, filling the air with a bloody mist. Outside the small sword pagoda, the 99th incense stick began to burn. 99th incense stick. He really did it. He broke the legendary record. Everyone's mouth was wide open as they sucked in a breath of cold air. Their brains were about to short-circuit. Another 10 strong enemies appeared, and their strength was obviously stronger. The pressure on Chumu increased as he fought. There were 3 wounds on his body, and blood kept flowing out. The 3rd style of the golden edge sword art in his left hand, and the 8th style in his right. It's rumored that when the dual sword technique is trained to the large success stage, one will be able to use 2 swords to perform different sword techniques. The power will be even more powerful. Chumu thought to himself as he used the golden edge sword technique to fight. Now his lower-level dual sword art had finally stabilized under this bloody battle. He could execute any basic style of the same sword art as he wished. His overall strength had increased by 30% compared to when he used a single sword. Phantom Steps was executed to the limit, and the 10 phantoms were unpredictable. Cloud-shattering sword explosion. Cloud-shattering sword explosion. The 2 swords separated as they executed their respective cloud sword arts. Suddenly, countless clouds soared chi as thick as a finger shot out in all directions, almost covering the entire room. Only the spot where Chumu was standing was spared. 99 incense sticks have finished burning. An ear-piercing scream sounded. Thousands of eyes were focused on the 100 sticks of incense. The 99th incense stick had finished burning, and finally, 100 incense sticks. 100 incense sticks. This scream was incomparably mournful, as if someone's chrysanthemum had been ruthlessly stabbed with a mace. Breaking the record, 100 incense sticks. Huangfu Kuang was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that a competition with Chumu would break the record. Inside the small sword pagoda, the endless scarlet blood on the ground and walls suddenly emitted a dazzling light. A figure slowly condensed and rapidly absorbed all the scarlet blood. In the end, a swordsman wearing a red swordsman's robe with long hair as red as blood shot out a demonic scarlet light from his eyes and instantly landed on Chumu's body. Immediately, Chumu's hair stood on end and his muscles unconsciously tightened, almost unable to breathe. He felt as if all the muscles in his body had been struck by a high-voltage electric current. His entire body was paralyzed and he couldn't move at all. A kind of trembling feeling came from the bottom of his heart, and it wanted to destroy his soul and body. It was as if his soul was being pulled by an invisible bloody hand into a bloody purgatory, sinking deeper and deeper. Even if it's hell, I'll break it with my sword. Chumu's eyes suddenly shot out an incomparably sharp light that pierced through the void. His sword aura surged violently, and with a mysterious trajectory, it gathered on the fake, clear wind sword in his hand like a cool breeze. Immediately, the fake, clear wind sword became as heavy as 10,000 jin. With a loud shout, Chumu released all the power in his body. With a slash of his sword, the terrifying sword aura turned into a thunderous force that tore a hole in the blood purgatory. With a kacha-kacha sound like a mirror shattering, the blood purgatory collapsed. In the milky white room, Chumu's face was pale. Cold sweat seeped out of his forehead and slid down his cheeks. A feeling of weakness emerged from his soul and body, making it difficult for him to even stand. The sword in his hand almost fell to the ground. The bloody figure in front of him was like a demonic god from purgatory. With a light wave of the bloody sword in his hand, a solid bloody sword light shot through the air. Chumu was unable to dodge and was directly killed. A figure was ejected and landed on the ground. He's out, he's finally out. 100 incense sticks. Although it's only the 100th stick, it has already broken the previous record and created a new record. Unbelievable. All kinds of discussions could be heard, and it was extremely noisy. Chumu shifted his gaze and looked. The 100 sticks of incense had already burned to the last stick, but it had only just begun to burn. He let out a breath and dispelled the depression in his heart. His pale face gradually regained its color. "You've won, big brother." Huang Fu Kuang said sincerely. He was now sincerely convinced. He believed that even the current Huang Fu Shenglong would not be able to persist until the 99th stick of incense, let alone the 100th stick. Calling such a person Big Brother was not only a disgrace to him, but it was also his fortune. Nodding, Chu Mu smiled slightly. Although the sword qi in his body had completely recovered, and his physical strength had also recovered, waves of weakness came from his soul. It was as if he had overused his brain and was giving off bursts of stabbing pain. Without waiting for the Iron Sword leaderboard to announce the rankings, Chu Mu left first. He was certain that the first place would be none other than him. Another round of the small sword pagoda ranking battle ended. Lien Qingyun and the others looked at Chu Mu's back as he left, unable to produce any thoughts of resistance. The gap between them was too big, and it was getting bigger and bigger. They were not in the same world. They all knew that in this world, there was a kind of person who was born to be looked up to. This kind of person was destined to live an extraordinary and brilliant life. Wherever they went, they would leave their shadow behind and be branded in people's hearts. It was like the legends they had heard one after another. In a daze, they seemed to have seen a new legend slowly unfold. What? You actually persisted until the 100th stick of incense. Huang Fu Fian jumped up in shock. Her expression was very comical. Compared to persisting until the 100th stick of incense, first place was nothing. Fortunately, I left in time. After a while, Huang Fu Fian reacted and revealed a proud smile. She said to Huang Fu Kuang, "Look at how smart I am. Otherwise, who knows what kind of conditions that cold-faced man would have brought up. No, if he comes to me with conditions, I'll pretend I'm not here and focus on cultivation. My will is almost at 30%. Once I reach 30%, I'll immediately prepare to break through to the Qi transformation realm. At that time, he definitely won't be able to find me. Big guy, you must remember not to tell the cold-faced man anything. Otherwise, I'll definitely find out and settle accounts with you." Huang Fu Kuang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Huang Fu Fian was usually too lazy to cultivate. He didn't expect her to be determined to cultivate diligently and break through to the Qi transformation realm as soon as possible. Shaking his head, Huang Fu Kuang didn't say anything and left the 4th tower. He walked back to his own tower. At the same time, a meeting was being held in the palace Lord's Tower. The content of the meeting revolved around Chu Mu. After reaching an agreement, a deacon from the 100 Affairs Hall was sent to Chu Mu's tower. Chu Mu, who had won first place, was qualified to challenge Huang Fu Shenglong. However, Huang Fu Shenglong was currently in seclusion, preparing to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Therefore, Chu Mu couldn't challenge him. Although I don't know why such a powerful enemy appeared in the small sword pagoda at the end, I'm sure that Guy's sword Qi cultivation was at the Qi transformation realm. Moreover, he wasn't an ordinary Qi transformation realm cultivator. Chu Mu said with certainty. His eyes were filled with contemplation. That casual sword strike contained a strange concept. It wasn't a concept I've seen before, but it was similar to the concept of water. Could it be the concept of blood? But that's not the main point. The main point is that I successfully condensed the sword force on my sword and released it. The power of that strike was earth-shattering. Chu Mu's eyes burst with a shocking light. He suddenly stood up and pulled out his sword. The sword force surged out, but he was still unable to condense it on his sword. No, it still doesn't work. Why not? What is it that I'm missing? Chu Mu frowned. He sat down again and pondered. The situation at that time was that his soul seemed to have been pulled into a bloody purgatory. He couldn't extricate himself and kept sinking. It was as if he was going to die. Chu Mu didn't know if his soul would fall into oblivion and he would become a living dead person if he fell into oblivion. But in that dangerous situation, his potential was completely stimulated. He released a sword strike that he couldn't normally release, surpassing his own limits. And now, Chumu wanted to grasp that momentary flash of inspiration to once again release that inconceivable sword and then control it. It was a difficult process. Not long after, the seal of the sword pagoda was triggered, alarming Chumu. When he walked out of the sword pagoda, he saw a deacon of the Hall of 100 Affairs standing outside. He was looking at Chumu with a smile. "Chumu, congratulations on obtaining first place on the Iron Sword list," the deacon said. "Thank you," Chumu responded politely. "I'm looking for you because I have something very important to tell you. At the same time, it's also very good news," the Hall of 100 Affairs said with a smile. The deacon of the Hall of 100 Affairs smiled and did not keep them in suspense. He continued, "Since you have broken the previous record and created a new one, the chief has decided to reward you by increasing your time in the cultivation Holy Land by 100 times. In other words, in addition to the 178 hours that you should have for first place, you will receive an additional 188 hours in total." When Chumu heard this, he immediately let out a smile. To him, this was indeed a pretty good piece of news. "Okay, I'm done. I believe that with so much time in the cultivation sanctum, your strength will definitely improve by leaps and bounds again," the deacon said. He then said goodbye. Although he was in the Chi transformation realm and was not someone that ordinary Chi transformation realm cultivators could compare with, when facing people like Chumu, he would always treat him as an equal or even humbly. This was because he was very clear that his lifetime achievement would probably only be in the Chi-Si realm or the 9th transformation realm at most. However, people like Chumu could at least reach the 9th transformation realm or even the origin realm. Even if they were in the same realm, he would not be Chumu's opponent. The gap between them had already determined each other's achievements. "Not bad. 288 hours is enough for me to raise my metal essence to 30%. At that time, I will break through to the Chi transformation realm and directly raise my metal cloud dual wills to the initial success," Chumu said to himself. He returned to the second floor of the Sword Pagoda and pondered over the problem from before. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 202. Sword momentum is formless and colorless. It can't be seen or touched, but it's the embodiment of a swordsman's profound understanding of swordsmanship. It's the integration of one's essence, chi, and spirit into a sword. Displaying sword momentum doesn't consume sword aura, but essence, chi, and spirit. To put it more accurately, it consumes one's mental strength and physical strength. I can feel the flow of the sword momentum formed by the integration of essence, chi, and spirit. But when I want to condense the sword momentum into the sword in my hand, it seems to be blocked by something. I can't do it? Inside the 5th tower, Chumu stood on the 1st floor with a sword in hand. There was an aura all over his body that was condensed into one. His essence, chi, and spirit were completely integrated, and he could control it freely. After a period of comprehension, Chumu still hadn't figured out how to condense the sword momentum into the sword and release it to form a powerful attack. However, he was much more proficient in controlling the sword momentum. He was only one step away from being able to control it as he wished. If he could reach the level of being able to control it as he wished, he would be able to easily condense the sword momentum into the sword in his hand. This was the 3rd day since Chumu won first place in the new small Sword Pagoda ranking battle. Sheathing his sword, Chumu walked out of the tower and headed outside. Walking out of the seal, Chumu planned to go to the sacred cultivation ground. He had already comprehended 25% of the metal concept. Perhaps he would be able to comprehend 26% today. Chumu estimated that he hadn't used up all the time in the sacred cultivation ground. In fact, he didn't even need to use half of the time to comprehend 30%. As soon as he walked out of the seal, a gust of wind suddenly blew over. The airflow accelerated and quickly came from afar. It blew past Chumu and behind him. Chu Mu subconsciously looked back and was stunned. There were many air flows flowing in the direction of the third tower. Chu Mu could clearly feel the fluctuation of spirit chi becoming more intense. It came from all directions and converged into the third tower. With a slight movement of his body, Chu Mu floated forward along with the airflow. He quickly arrived outside the seal of the third sword tower. He saw that the airflow above the third sword tower had converged from afar, forming a cyclone that was gradually becoming more and more substantial. Whoosh! 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 Even further away, above the second sword tower, a cyclone also appeared. Chu Mu's heart skipped a beat. He quickly rushed towards the second sword tower and looked at the first sword tower. Sure enough, there was also a cyclone rotating rapidly above the first sword tower. A large amount of spirit chi flowed over from afar. The speed of the spirit chi became faster and more violent, forming the momentum of a surging river and waves. Violent and mighty whistling sounds continuously rang out, shocking the surroundings. An elder from the holy land of cultivation looked up at the sky and muttered, "This abnormal fluctuation of spirit chi. Someone is about to break through to the chi transformation realm. Big Brother Xinglong is about to break through." Huangfu Kuang and a large group of people came from afar. "What a huge spirit chi whirlpool!" many people exclaimed. In the past 100 years, the largest spirit chi whirlpool for outer house students to break through to the chi transformation realm was 70 meters, but there was only one. Huangfu Xinglong's group's 50 meters is already in the top 10. Soon, above the three sword towers, the cyclone had condensed into a whirlpool with a diameter of 50 meters. It spun crazily, continuously absorbing spirit chi from afar and pouring it into the sword towers. It rumbled loudly with great momentum. The flow of the airflow formed an extremely strong storm. It whistled and attacked, making it impossible for people to get close to the sword towers. Their entire bodies were almost blown away. They had to use their sword chi to stabilize their bodies, but their eyes were unable to open due to the wind. Chu Mu stood majestically in the strong wind. 40% of the wind concept allowed him to ignore this kind of strong wind. When breaking through to the chi transformation realm, one will communicate with the outside world. From the inside out, one will transform acquired sword chi into Xiantian sword chi and crazily absorb spirit chi from the outside world. Because the flow of spirit chi is too fast and too fierce, it will form a spirit chi whirlpool. As his strength increased, Chu Mu's knowledge also gradually increased. When a normal sword artist breaks through to the chi transformation realm, they will only be able to form a spirit chi whirlpool about 10 meters in diameter. The higher the talent and the deeper the foundation of the sword artist, the bigger the spirit chi whirlpool. 50 meters. This means that the three of them are far superior to others in terms of talent and foundation. Because they were too close, although the strong wind was unable to affect Chu Mu, the pressure that gradually condensed into a suppressive aura came crushing over. It was as if a chi transformation realm expert was releasing his own aura to invade the surroundings. The pressure was heavy, especially with the 50-meter spirit chi whirlpools above the three sword towers. The pressure created by the spirit chi whirlpools was even more intense, making it difficult for Chu Mu to breathe. Subconsciously, he combined his essence, chi and soul. His sword aura surged and condensed into a sword, resisting the powerful spirit chi whirlpool. As if sensing Chu Mu's resistance, the spirit chi whirlpool seemed to be angered. The rumbling sound of thunder became even louder, and the pressure became even more intense. The huge pressure immediately made Chu Mu enter a strange state. It was as if he had returned to the small sword pagoda and was facing that terrifying enemy. He was about to be suppressed in purgatory, never to rise again. Purely out of instinct, Chu Mu pulled out his sword. His sword aura rushed towards the fake, clear wind sword like water. A formless yet incomparably powerful blade, aura condensed, and he slashed out. With a loud rumbling sound, a vacuum could be faintly seen within the countless strong wind currents. The surrounding air currents paused, and the vacuum rushed towards the sword tower seal with lightning speed. It heavily bombarded the seal, causing it to cave in. The seal bounced back and shattered the remaining attack, creating countless ripples at the same time. So that's how it is, I finally understand. Heartfelt joy welled up in his heart. Chu Mu slashed out with his sword again. Immediately, the sword aura condensed on the sword in his hand, turning into an incomparably powerful blade aura that slashed out. Once again, the chaotic air currents created a vacuum. An intense feeling of weakness immediately surged through his body. Chu Mu hurriedly used Wandering in the Wind and quickly retreated along the path of the chaotic air currents, leaving the range of the chaotic air currents. Big brother! Huang Fu Kuang immediately shouted. Chu Mu nodded, barely resisting the weakness that came from inside out. He said a few words to Huang Fu Kuang, then returned to his own sword tower. He needed to rest and recover. The appearance of the spirit chi vortex would last for quite a long time. During this time, the people enveloped by the spirit chi vortex would completely transform their acquired sword chi into innate sword chi. Moreover, their bodies would be tempered, achieving the goal of being reborn. The attack released by condensing the sword aura on the sword has extremely strong condensing characteristics and power. Now that I've already grasped it, I'll give this sword a name. This sword was first released in the small sword pagoda, sinking into the blood purgatory. I believe that once the sword aura increases, the power of this sword will become more and more powerful. So, let's call it the prison-breaking sword. With my current essence, energy, and spirit, I can only use the prison-breaking sword once. The second time is too forceful. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I won't use it again. It took Chu Mu more than half a day to recover his essence, energy, and spirit. However, night fell, and he didn't go to the holy land of cultivation until the next day to enter the gold sword tomb. Huang Fu Shanglong, Qin Shi, and Ouyang Qingya also spent more than half a day to complete the transformation of their acquired sword qi into innate sword qi. Moreover, they also underwent the tempering of being reborn. Later, Chu Mu heard that they were summoned by the principal, and then left the outer school for the inner school. Their departure didn't cause too much of a stir. For the outer school students, someone could break through to the qi transformation realm at any time. Apart from the more talented students who were determined to comprehend 30% of the intent realm before breaking through, there were also some who felt that it was too difficult to comprehend 30% of the intent realm. They just tried their best to raise the intent realm to a certain level, then accumulate their own foundation, and then break through to the qi transformation realm. In the blink of an eye, another 6 days passed. In the gold sword tomb, Chu Mu was still practicing the gold edge swordsmanship. Every move was at his fingertips, and the feeling of transcendence was getting stronger and stronger. It was as if in the next second, Chu Mu's gold edge swordsmanship could surpass perfection and reach a higher level. 29% of the intent realm of metal, practicing the gold edge swordsmanship over and over again. The 10,000 swords around him resonated and danced, and there was also a sense of transcendence. All kinds of profound essence of the intent realm of metal emerged layer by layer in his mind, slowly flowing through his heart. He carefully pondered over it and deepened it. Suddenly, as if a thin layer of membrane had been pierced, Chu Mu's spirit trembled, and he unconsciously stopped practicing. His pupils turned into a pure pale gold, extremely sharp and penetrating into the void. 30% of the intent realm of metal. The 10,000 swords fell and returned to their original place. Chu Mu sheathed his sword, took out the sword token, and left the gold sword tomb. How come you came out today? You still have a lot of time left. The guardian elder of the holy land of cultivation was puzzled. 30% of the intent realm. I don't need to continue comprehending it, Chumu calmly replied. The guardian elder was stunned once again. After 3 breaths, he shook his head and bitterly smiled. You always surprise me. Now that you have comprehended 30% of the 3 intents, and your sword chi cultivation has also reached the peak of half-step chi transformation realm, prepare a little and you can break through to the chi transformation realm. However, I have some advice for you. The moment you break through to the chi transformation realm, you will enter a temporary state of being one with the world. Under this state, your comprehension will multiply, and there is a certain chance that you can successfully raise your intent realm from 30% to 40%. I believe that with your comprehension, you can achieve 100%. However, the duration of being one with the world is too short, so my advice is to choose one of the intents to break through. Only when you have the energy to do so can you break through to the second one. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Many thanks, Elder. Chu-Mu saluted with his sword. The elder nodded. After interacting with Chu-Mu for a while, he clearly knew that Chu-Mu was a very opinionated person. He would not easily accept the advice of others. I'll take my leave first, Chu-Mu said. Okay. Oh, right. You still have more than 100 holy land of cultivation time left. You can transfer the remaining time, the elder said. Chu-Mu's footsteps paused slightly. He nodded and continued walking towards the 5th sword tower. He had already made up his mind about the remaining time. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 203. 40% of the concept of wind. 30% of the concept of cloud. 30% of the concept of metal. Beginner level of sword force. These were the things that Chu-Mu had with him. They were his true strength. Up until now, no one had been able to make him use all of his strength and trump cards. My sword chi cultivation is at the peak of the half-step chi transformation realm. I'm only a step away from the true chi transformation realm. However, I still need to make some preparations to ensure that when I break through, I can raise the concept of cloud and metal to 40%. It would be best if I could raise the concept of wind a bit as well. Chu-Mu announced that he was going into seclusion and refused all interruptions. As a result, the people of the outer palace began to speculate. In the end, they all believed that not long after Huangfu Shenglong and the other 2, another person was about to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Could it be that Chu-Mu's concept has already reached 30%? Someone couldn't help but ask, Are you stupid? If it's not 30% with Chu-Mu's talent, would he be so reckless? Someone immediately said with disdain, You're the stupid one. How can you be so sure that Chu-Mu is going into seclusion to break through to the Qi transformation realm? If I say you don't understand, then you don't understand. I'm too lazy to explain. I didn't think that the cold-faced man was already preparing to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Huangfu Fian's small face was filled with contemplation. Soon after, she clapped her hands. No, this time I can't lose to him no matter what. I have to enter the Qi transformation realm before him. As she spoke, Huangfu Fian also announced that she was going into seclusion. Big Brother and Little Swallow have already announced that they're going into seclusion. It seems that they're preparing to break through to the Qi transformation realm. My concept of power is not far from 30%. Then I'll also go into seclusion and focus on comprehending the concept of power. I'll try to reach 30% as soon as possible, and then prepare to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Huangfu Kuang muttered to himself. It was as if a new wave of cultivation craze had started, and seclusion was the trend. There was nothing special about Chu-Mu's seclusion. Although his sword chi was already extremely pure, it still needed to be refined. At the same time, he also needed to adjust his mental state so that his essence, Qi and spirit could reach their peak. Only when everything was adjusted to its peak state would it be the best time to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Otherwise, if it was too early or too slow, it would have an impact. 2 days. Chu Mu only used 2 days to adjust his condition. His upper elemental sword Qi was originally very pure, and it could be adjusted with a little bit of adjustment. Because of his unusually strong soul power, his essence, Qi and spirit could be adjusted very quickly, and his Qi and blood were vigorous. It's time to break through to the Qi transformation stage. Chu Mu muttered to himself as he sat down on the second floor of the sword gauntlet and began channeling the Shangyuan sword Qi art. Breaking through from the sword Qi realm to the Qi transformation realm was a transition from the Hotian realm to the Xiantian realm. It was quite difficult. However, every swordsman had already experienced that feeling when they broke through to the 9th stage of the sword Qi realm. It left a slight impression in their hearts and became an entry point for them to break through. The more talented a person was, the easier it was for them to find an entry point. Naturally, it would be easier for them to break through. For example, Chu Mu's 7th grade cultivation talent was very ordinary in the Sword Mansion. However, in other aspects he was not ordinary at all. According to what Chu Mu had learned during this period of time, there were 2 ways to break through to the Qi transformation realm. The first way was to first transform one's Hotian sword Qi into Xiantian sword Qi, and then refine one's body to successfully break through to the Qi transformation realm. The second way was to first expel one's Hotian sword Qi from one's body, and then use the external spiritual Qi to refine one's body. After that, one would absorb the external spiritual Qi into one's body and refine it into Xiantian sword Qi. These 2 methods were not necessarily better or worse, but the order was different. However, the first method required a longer time, and it was steady and steady. The second method was more efficient, but it was best if one already had a streak of Xiantian sword Qi in their Dantian as a primer. Chu Mu had already made his choice after understanding this. The origin sword Qi flowed rapidly in his meridians. When the speed of the sword Qi reached a perfect balance, Chu Mu's mind flashed, and he subconsciously ejected the origin sword Qi from his body. Whooshing sounds could be heard as streaks of white arrows shot out from Chu Mu's body in all directions. They were extremely fast, sharp, and ferocious. Chu Mu seemed to have turned into a hedgehog. These sword Qi were all Hotian sword Qi, and they dissipated into the air. Subsequently, Chu Mu used the method of controlling the sword Qi to gather the surrounding spiritual Qi and began to nourish and refine his body. External sword aura originally had the effect of nourishing the body. Although the effects weren't immediate, it was long-lasting and gentle. It was like the silent spring rain that moistened everything. At this moment, Chu Mu's body was even purer than other half-step Qi transformation peak swordsmen. Spiritual Qi flowed slowly in his body, and a mixture of black and scarlet filth was expelled little by little from his pores. A foul stench immediately filled the air. In a mere 6 hours, Chu Mu had completed the steps of refining his body with spiritual Qi. After refining his body, regardless of whether it was strength, reaction, or explosive power, they all had obvious improvements. The toughness of his meridians had also increased by a lot, and they were now able to withstand the impact of Xiantian sword Qi. With a thought, the only Xiantian sword Qi hidden in his Dantian immediately flowed out of his Dantian and circulated in his meridians. His meridians did not feel the slightest bit of pain. In a split second, the spiritual Qi of the outside world surged in from every pore on Chu Mu's body. All the spiritual Qi within the sword gauntlet was immediately gathered, and the spiritual Qi outside the sword gauntlet also surged rapidly, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea. Very quickly, an unceasingly spinning cyclone appeared in the sky above the 5th sword gauntlet, crazily absorbing the spiritual Qi flowing in from all directions. The cyclone's range grew larger and larger, and its color became darker and denser. That's the fifth sword gauntlet, the sword gauntlet Chu-Mu lives in. Is he also about to break through to the Qi transformation realm? For a moment, the entire outer house was once again alarmed. A large number of students left their sword gauntlets and gathered a few hundred meters away from the fifth sword gauntlet, staring at the cyclone above the fifth sword gauntlet. What a huge cyclone! It looks like it's at least 40 meters. It's indeed huge, but it's still not as big as Huangfu Xinglong and the other two. Whether it's comparable or not, we'll know in the end. Look, that cyclone is rapidly growing. The airflow turned into a wind, blowing everyone's black hair and clothes into a mess. They all narrowed their eyes and stared at the cyclone above the sword gauntlet that was gradually condensing into a spiritual chi vortex. It's already 50 meters. It's not inferior to any of Huangfu Shenglong and the other two. It seems to be still expanding. In the past 100 years, when the outer house students broke through to the Qi transformation realm, the largest spiritual Qi vortex was 70 meters. I wonder how many meters Chu-Mu's spiritual Qi vortex can grow to? I wonder if Chu-Mu can break another record and create a new one. Therefore, many students were looking forward to it. This cold-faced man actually broke it earlier than me. In the fourth sword gauntlet, Huangfu Fian had an unhappy expression and clenched her fists in indignation. Big Brother is about to break through to the Qi transformation realm. Judging from the momentum, he's not inferior to Big Brother Xinglong, Huangfu Kuang said inwardly. The spiritual Qi vortex continued to expand 60 meters. Under everyone's gazes, the spiritual Qi vortex expanded to 70 meters. The violent wind blew, forcing the students who were a few hundred meters away from the fifth sword gauntlet to retreat another 200 meters. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stand firm. 70 meters! Chu-Mu has already tied the highest record in the past 100 years. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Why do I feel that the whirlpool of spiritual energy is still expanding? Someone rubbed his eyes with all his strength, causing them to turn red as he spoke with a face full of astonishment. No, it's not your eyes playing tricks on you. The spiritual Qi vortex is still expanding. Is Chu-Mu going to create a new record? Everyone was extremely excited and looking forward to it. Their breathing became hurried and their faces flushed red. 80 meters, the spiritual Qi vortex was still expanding. 90 meters, the spiritual Qi vortex paused for a moment before expanding again. However, the speed of expansion was getting slower and slower like a snail. 90 meters. The person who spoke was stuttering, and his voice was constantly trembling. Rumbling sounds continued to shake the surroundings. The terrifying storm had already covered a kilometer around the fifth sword gauntlet. Everyone had no choice but to retreat a kilometer away. The sword gauntlet was in the center of the storm, making people very worried that it would be swept away. However, the seal displayed an extremely powerful force and forcibly blocked the storm that was terrifying enough to kill an ordinary Qi transformation realm swordsman. It didn't budge at all. The spiritual Qi vortex had a whirlpool that poured into the sword gauntlet like a cone. As the spiritual Qi vortex spun crazily, the purest part of the spiritual Qi was rapidly condensed and poured into the sword gauntlet along the cone, where it was absorbed by Chu-Mu. With a strand of Xiantian sword Qi as a guide, Chu-Mu quickly absorbed the pure spiritual Qi that filled the entire sword gauntlet. The spiritual Qi was quickly converted into Xiantian sword Qi in his meridians, causing the Xiantian sword Qi to become more and more vigorous. Time slowly passed. The spiritual Qi vortex had expanded to 100 meters in size and completely stabilized. As if the end of the world had arrived, the spiritual Qi in the entire outer palace became turbulent and turned into gusts of wind that blew over. No matter where one was in the outer palace, one could clearly see the huge spiritual Qi vortex in the sky with just a slight raise of their head. The entire spiritual Qi vortex was a dense, grayish-white color, as if it was spinning the entire sky. 100 meters. Under the gale, even the sound changed. For a moment, the people who stared at the huge spiritual chi vortex couldn't tell what they were feeling. Excitement, anticipation, envy, excitement, or bitterness, disappointment. In short, they felt as if they had flipped open a bottle of 5 different flavors. It was abnormally complicated. The sky became darker and darker. It was as heavy and oppressive as the storm before it arrived. It was almost suffocating. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 204. Spiritual chi that was as pure as a low-grade spirit stone continuously poured down from the top of the sword gauntlet, filling up the sword gauntlet and turning it into a sea of pure spiritual chi. Chu Mu, who was in the middle of the sea of spiritual chi, did not need to actively absorb it. The innate sword chi in his meridians grew stronger and stronger, naturally producing a strong suction force that sucked the surrounding spiritual chi into his body and quickly turned it into innate sword chi. Compared to Hotian's sword aura, Xiantian's sword aura was 10 times purer. Therefore, even if a large amount of pure spirit aura was absorbed and rapidly converted into Chu Mu's body, it was still unable to fill up Xiantian's sword aura in a short period of time. Pure spiritual chi poured into Chu Mu's body continuously. Other than being turned into innate sword chi, it was also constantly nourishing his body. In this situation, Chu Mu's mind was gradually emptied. His soul power seemed to be unconsciously radiating out, diffusing around his body and into the air, gradually forming a connection with the outside world. Even though Chu Mu's soul strength was several times stronger than normal people's, it still gave him a monstrous level of comprehension and an even more resilient mental strength. But other than that, Chu Mu had never used the so-called soul power. The soul power that was several times stronger than ordinary swordsmen had never been used in any other way. It was not that Chu Mu was unwilling, but that he did not know how to. The soul belonged to an incomparably mysterious domain. He could only feel that his soul was far stronger than ordinary people, but he could not feel how much stronger his soul was, let alone use it. But at this moment, Chu Mu's soul power radiated out from the depths of his mind, spreading out bit by bit. 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. When it reached 6 meters, the radiating soul power stopped, as if it had reached its limit. Then, Chu Mu felt his soul shake, as if there was a pure energy pouring into his soul from nothingness. His soul became stronger and more solid, and the radiating soul power spread out again. 7 meters, 8 meters, 9 meters, 10 meters. When the soul energy's radiation reached 10 meters, Chu Mu completely entered the ethereal state, the rare state of being one with the world. In this state, Chu Mu suddenly recovered a small part of his consciousness from his unconscious state. He felt that his thoughts were unprecedentedly clear, like a perfect diamond without all the dust, flawless and flawless. At a glance, he could see through everything, straight to the essence. Chu Mu controlled a small part of his consciousness, and all kinds of understandings of the concept of clouds immediately rushed into his mind. Clouds gathered and dispersed impermanently, changing irregularly, rolling and unrolling at the same time. They were both comfortable and leisurely. Therefore, there was a saying that they had no intention of leaving or staying, drifting with the clouds beyond the heavens. Yi Qin began to deepen his comprehension of the 30% concept of clouds. All kinds of mysteries appeared in his mind. Chu Mu's pupils were like 2 white clouds rotating. The whites of his eyes seemed to have turned into a sea of clouds. White clouds appeared and quickly floated by, gathering and dispersing, impermanence and indefinite. The pure spiritual chi that had gathered around him was suddenly affected as well. It became like clouds that gathered and dispersed irregularly, fluctuating unpredictably. 31%, 32%. Like riding on a rocket, The comprehension of the concept of clouds increased rapidly, which was extremely shocking. Not long after, the concept of clouds successfully increased to 40%. At this point, Chumu only felt that all kinds of understandings of the concept of clouds became obscure and difficult. He knew that this was his current limit. Even if he spent the rest of his time on it, he would not be able to make any progress. The concept of clouds retracted, and the airflow returned to normal. The concept of gold appeared again. In a split second, the airflow formed by the pure spiritual qi changed again. Each of them became incomparably sharp, like sharp and cold swords shooting towards Chumu. They seemed to want to pierce through Chumu and kill him with 10,000 swords. All kinds of mysteries of the concept of gold appeared in his mind again, like a surging tide. Jin Jiqiang's sharpness was incomparably sharp. It was incomparably swift and fierce, able to cut through all things and penetrate everything. Chumu's pupils became a pale gold color. Faintly, there seemed to be two small golden swords flickering within. The whites of his eyes were also suffused with a faint golden stream of air, causing his eyes to be incomparably sharp. Normal people would feel as if their eyes were being attacked by a sword ray, unable to withstand it. The concept of gold began to increase. 31%, 32%, 33%. Compared to the speed of the concept of clouds, the concept of gold was not inferior. 40%. When the concept of gold increased to 40%, Chumu once again felt that the comprehension of the concept of gold had become incomparably difficult and obscure. He was already powerless to continue. However, the ethereal realm of unity of heaven and man was not over yet. With a flash of inspiration, Chumu locked onto the sword aura. Sword aura was the embodiment of the swordsman's sharpness. Essence, chi, and spirit merged into one, condensing into a sword. Comprehend the swordsman's belief and sword spirit. Combine the belief and sword spirit of the swordsman with one's own essence, chi, and spirit, and finally condense into one, forming the sword aura. With the sword aura on the body, the sharpness was endless. Facing all kinds of pressure and all kinds of negative emotions, one could resist them. Chumu's sword aura was at the entry level. But recently, when he studied how to gather the sword aura on the sword and transform it into an attack, his comprehension of the sword aura deepened by a lot. At this moment, under the ethereal realm of unity of heaven and man, his comprehension of the sword aura gushed out like a flood. The spiritual chi that was madly converging became overbearing and dense, like a towering mountain. It also contained boundless sharpness, as if it was capable of shattering and slicing through everything. It was even more boundless and powerful than before, and it was not in any way inferior to the Sword Pavilion Elder of the Azure Edge Sword Sect. Unknowingly, Chumu's sword aura had a breakthrough, from the entry level to the small success level, and its power had multiplied. His mind shook, and the radiating soul energy quickly retreated, retreating into the depths of his soul. Chumu's body swayed, and he retreated from the ethereal realm of unity of heaven and man. The Xiantian sword chi in his body had also accumulated to the maximum, reaching a saturated state. Chumu had officially stepped into a new realm of swordsman, chi transformation realm. My soul has actually become even stronger. Chumu carefully sensed that his soul was now much stronger than before. The essence of cloud and essence of gold have both increased to 40%, which is expected. What is unexpected is that the sword aura has also increased from the entry level to the small success level, which is an unexpected surprise. He muttered to himself, "Now, if I use the prison-breaking sword, its power will definitely be 2 or 3 times stronger than before, maybe even more." Taking a deep breath, the slowly dissipating spirit chi entered his nose, making Chumu feel very comfortable. His whole body was warm and full of vitality. This feeling was very wonderful, and Chumu was addicted to it. The violent wind outside the sword tower also gradually became gentle, and the range became smaller and smaller. The huge spirit chi whirlpool above the sword tower was slowly dissipating and finally disappeared. Everything returned to its initial tranquility, as if nothing had happened. However, everyone who was watching knew what had happened. They had witnessed the birth of another record, and perhaps this was the beginning of a legend. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 205. Cool and clear water poured down from the top, splashing countless water droplets. Chu Mu was 18 years old this year, with a height of 1 meter and 70 centimeters. Because of his cultivation, his muscles were defined but not hard, giving off a soft and tenacious beauty. His skin was smooth and white, making many girls envious. The cool water quickly slid down his body, unable to stay on his smooth skin. Under his skin, there seemed to be a faint jade-like luster flowing slowly. Every movement of his revealed a sense of power, completely different from before. When I broke through to the chi transformation realm, I used my spirit chi to refine my body, causing my body to be reborn. It really feels different, full of vitality. Chu Mu thought to himself as he washed himself. Unfortunately, for some reason, when I broke through, the external sword chi and internal sword chi merged into one, turning into innate sword chi. Since then, I no longer have the distinction between the internal and external sword chi, which has undoubtedly caused me to lose one of my trump cards. But, fortunately, I have also gained a new ability, which can be used as a less important trump card. After washing himself, Chu Mu picked up a towel to wipe off the water droplets on his body and put on a clean blue robe. This robe was worn by the inner disciples of the Azure Edge sword sect. Chu Mu had a few of them, and besides the damaged one, he had been changing the others. Now that I have reached the chi transformation realm, I am qualified to become an inner disciple. In the future, I will need more advanced sword chi arts and sword arts, and also a real sword to bring out the true power of the chi transformation realm. At this time, the seal outside the sword tower was triggered. Chu Mu walked down the tower and saw a person outside. It was a deacon of the 100 Affair Hall. Chu Mu, the palace master wants to see you. The deacon said directly. Okay. Chu Mu walked out of the seal and followed the deacon. Under the guidance of the deacon, they came to a sword tower that was obviously different from the others. The manor lord is inside the sword tower. Come with me, the deacon said. The deacon seemed to have a sword token that corresponded to the seal of the sword tower. He opened an entrance and let Chu Mu in. Manor lord, Chu Mu is here. Standing at the entrance of the sword tower, the deacon lowered his head slightly and announced loudly, Come in. A dignified voice came from inside. Chu Mu, you can go in. My mission is complete. The deacon smiled. Thank you for your trouble. Chu Mu nodded his head and exhaled lightly. He strode into the sword tower. The area of the first floor of the sword tower was obviously a few times larger than that of the No. 5 sword tower, and its height was also twice as high. Chu Mu was slightly stunned. I'm upstairs. The authoritative voice came again. Chu Mu walked up the stairs to the second floor. The area of the second floor was also a few times larger than that of the number 5 sword tower. The light was dim, but it didn't affect Chu Mu's vision. The decorations were very simple, and it was obvious that the manor lord wasn't someone who loved to enjoy life. Chu Mu's gaze was attracted by a back view. The back view was on the balcony, looking at the sky with his hands behind his back. The figure wasn't very tall, but it gave Chu Mu a sense of majesty, as if he was looking up at a tall mountain. At the same time, he didn't give Chu Mu any pressure. Chu Mu, you, who came from a low-grade sword sect, have brought me too many surprises. The owner of the back view said slowly. His voice was somewhat dignified and had a unique rhythm. In an instant, He grabbed Chumu's full attention to listen to his words. You killed your way through the 3 stages of the natural barrier, ranked in the top 3 with your 10th phase peak sword chi cultivation, and even obtained first place in the Savage Bee Forest. You have displayed extraordinary sword skills. Chumu didn't say anything. These weren't secrets. As long as he was willing, he could ask, let alone the outer Manor Lord. You once again created a miracle by participating in the small sword pagoda ranking battle. You were ranked 65th on the steel sword ranking battle. You were ranked 5th in the second small sword pagoda ranking battle. You were ranked 1st in the third small sword pagoda ranking battle. You even persisted for 100 incense sticks, creating a record that has never been seen in 100 years. It hasn't even been seen in 100 years. The Manor Lord continued. You comprehended the dual concepts of wind and cloud, and when you finally broke through to the Chi transformation realm, you triggered a 100-meter spirit Chi whirlpool, creating a new record. You have truly surprised me. Soon after, the Manor Lord turned around. In an instant, Chumu felt a light spread out. The darkness in the sword tower seemed to be swallowed up, and the entire tower was shining. Chumu discovered that the Manor Lord's appearance was very ordinary. There wasn't anything special about him, but his eyes were very deep, like a vast ocean. They were unfathomable, as if they could contain everything. Manor Lord. Chumu saluted with his sword. I'm very simple here. I hope you don't mind. The Manor Lord smiled gently, and his attitude was very kind. I summoned you for 2 reasons. The first is because I'm very curious. You really shocked me. The second is because I have a necessary itinerary. Every outer house student who breaks through to the Chi transformation realm is summoned by me. I will inform them of the relevant matters of the inner house and have them brought to the inner house. Then, Manor Lord, do you think I'm very ordinary when you see me now? Chumu asked with a slight smile. No. The Manor Lord shook his head slightly, but did not continue the topic. How much do you know about the inner house? Not much, Chumu replied. Very well. I will now explain to you the relevant matters of the inner house. This is something you should know. As for the rest, you can ask me. If I can answer you, I will naturally answer you, the Manor Lord said concisely. All right. Chumu nodded. The inner house students are all at the Chi transformation realm. Once an outer house student breaks through to the Chi transformation realm, he is qualified to become an inner house student. However, he still needs to pass an examination. The Manor Lord spoke frankly. This examination is very simple. As long as your sword Chi cultivation has reached the Chi transformation realm, there is basically no difficulty. Therefore, you don't have to worry about it. Chumu nodded. He originally thought that the so-called examination would be difficult, but after hearing the Manor Lord's words, it seemed that it was just a formality. After becoming an inner house student, you will be able to obtain the cultivation method of a low profound level sword chi art. However, this low profound level sword chi art is very ordinary. If you want to cultivate a more profound sword chi art, you will need to choose from the Hidden Arts Pavilion and exchange for it with academic credits. Here, I'll give you a suggestion. You'd rather spend a little more time to obtain academic credits and exchange them for a better sword chi technique than cultivate an ordinary low-grade, profound, rank sword chi technique. Because the difficulty of cultivating a profound rank sword chi technique is extremely great, and it consumes an extremely long amount of time. However, it still depends on the person. In addition, after becoming an inner house student, you will have a chance to choose whether or not to challenge. Challenge. Chumu's eyes flashed with a hint of curiosity. The challenges are arranged randomly. In other words, you will not be able to know the content of the challenge in advance. You will only receive a notification the day after you choose to challenge. If you pass the challenge, you will receive an additional reward, usually a low-level sword. If you fail the challenge, you will fail and will not receive any additional reward. The Manor Lord continued. Chu Mu suddenly understood. The challenges are arranged randomly. Aren't you worried that there will be challenges that I can't handle? Chu Mu thought for a moment and asked. Although the challenges are arranged randomly, the difficulty is within an acceptable range. I suggest that you choose to challenge. If you fail, you will not lose anything. If you pass, you will receive a low-level sword, which will increase your strength by a lot. Chu Mu nodded. In addition, there are a total of more than 70,000 students in the inner house. Every student has their own sword tower. In order to make it easier to manage and increase competition, the inner house is divided into 10 academies. When you apply to become an inner house student, you must choose one of the academies and become a member. In the past, whenever an outstanding student appeared, it would always lead to competition between the 10 academies, and even large fights would break out. There was once a large-scale conflict that resulted in many deaths, and the master of the Sword Palace was furious, so he issued a new order. The 10 academies are no longer allowed to compete for students, and students are free to choose which academy they want to join. The 10 academies are not allowed to interfere. Otherwise, I believe that with your talent, you will definitely be valued and will be able to obtain better techniques and swords. I prefer to obtain them myself, Chu Mu said indifferently. To be honest, there are strong and weak academies in the 10 academies. The top 3 academies are the first, second, and third academies, because Huangfu Huangtian came from the first academy, Chand Bu-er came from the second academy, and Shangguan Qinin came from the third academy. Many talented students join the 3 academies because of their fame. Thus, the overall strength of the 3 academies is greater than that of the other 6 academies. The Manor Lord nodded and said, By the way, the Sword House has 3 sons of swords. Manor Lord, I've heard about this before, Chu Mu said. All right. Since you've heard about it, it'll be easier for me to explain. The Manor Lord chuckled. The students of the first 3 academies are basically all from the Heavenly King Palace, the Sword Pavilion, and the Heavenly Music Pavilion. Otherwise, you'll be ostracized by them. If you want to join the first 3 academies, you'll most likely have to join one of these organizations. The other 7 academies are more relaxed. If you don't want to join any organization, you can choose one of the 7 back academies. Although it's not as good as the first 3 academies, as long as you stand out enough, you'll be valued and receive more resources. We swordsmen train ourselves and go against the flow. Even if we're in a difficult situation, we have to maintain a motivated heart, a swordsman's edge. Chu Mu nodded. That's right. A swordsman should have an edge. If a swordsman loses his edge, he won't be able to improve anymore. Instead of relying on others' charity, it's better to fight for it with the sword in your hand and train yourself. The Manor Lord nodded vigorously. Obviously, he was very much in favor of using the sword in one's hand to fight for resources and open up a path for oneself. This point was also very much in line with Chu Mu's point of view. After the conversation and the Manor Lord's explanation of the outer mansion, Chu Mu had a clearer understanding of the inner mansion. All right, I've already told you what you should know. As for the rest, you'll have to wait until you enter the inner mansion before you slowly experience it. The Manor Lord finally said, I'll give you 1 day to prepare. At this time tomorrow, come to me, and I'll personally take you to the inner mansion. I'll take my leave first. After the sword salute, Chu Mu excused himself and left the sword tower under the gaze of the Manor Lord. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Qijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 206. Red Crown Crane was a low-level monster trained by the Great Kuin Sword Mansion. Although it had the strength of a Qi transformation realm, it was gentle and did not attack unless it was provoked. The purpose of the Sword Mansion to train Red Crown Cranes was to use them as mounts. Among all the low-level monsters, Red Crown Cranes were the easiest to train. Moreover, they had a strong ability to carry weight and had great endurance. They also flew quickly and steadily. The outer mansion master rode one red-crowned crane while Chumu rode the other. They soared into the sky and flew into the distance. Their destination was the inner mansion of the Great Kuin Sword Mansion. The Great Kuin Sword Mansion was located in the Great Kuin Void Boundary and was independent of the outside world. However, the inner mansion and the outer mansion were not in the same place. The outer mansion was not far from the entrance of the Great Kuin Void Boundary, while the inner mansion was far away from the outer mansion. It was like the difference between the mortal world and the deep mountains and forests. Don't be too surprised when you reach the inner mansion. The outer mansion master's voice ignored the strong wind that was blowing and directly entered Chumu's ears. Chumu did not reply, but his curiosity was piqued. The Great Kuin Sword Mansion was established by the Great Kuin royal family. It included many disciples of the royal family and many outstanding disciples from various sword sections. It could be said to be the most powerful place in the entire Great Kuin dynasty. Just the inner mansion alone had more than 70,000 students. From this, it could be seen that the inner mansion was the true foundation of the Great Kuin Sword Mansion. As for the outer mansion, it could only be considered a front station. It was like a reserve force in the army. What was the difference between the inner mansion and the outer mansion other than the difference in cultivation and number of students? The red-crowned cranes flapped their wings and quickly left the outer mansion. They turned into two small dots and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Junior brother, I will make good use of the time you gave me. I will try to comprehend the essence and improve it to the maximum. Luo Yufeng looked up at the cloudless sky and clenched his fists as he said to himself. Chu Mu transferred the remaining usage time of more than 100 cultivation holy lands to Luo Yufeng. Originally, Luo Yufeng could only enjoy 8 hours of time to enter the cultivation holy land every 3 months. The effect of his comprehension was not obvious. After half a year, he had only touched the surface of the concept. However, he believed that with the 100+ hours that Chumu had given him, not only would he be able to successfully comprehend a concept, but he would also be able to raise his concept to 10% or even higher. In this way, his overall strength would improve again. Perhaps one day, he would be able to break into the top 100 of the Iron Sword list. Through his own efforts, he would be able to obtain more time to cultivate in the Holy Land. After crossing a tall mountain, Chumu's eyes suddenly widened. Looking down, he saw a vast group of sword towers densely covering the earth. This kind of feeling was like the first time he sat in a helicopter and flew over a bustling city. That kind of feeling was shocking. It was huge, extremely huge. There were so many sword towers that it was impossible to count how many of them there were. One could only tell that there were big and small sword towers, high and low sword towers. That was all. Just this alone was enough to make Chumu gasp in amazement. There are a total of 100,000 sword towers in the inner mansion. The voice of the outer mansion master sounded in his ears again. Students who come to the inner mansion for the first time will be shocked by the scene in front of them. After becoming a student of the inner mansion, each of you will have an independent sword tower to live in. However, the sword towers in the inner mansion are divided into 4 levels, from highest to lowest. They are heaven, earth, black, and yellow. Heaven, earth, black, and yellow? What's the difference between the different levels of the sword towers? Chumu asked. His voice was condensed in the sword chi. It tore through the violent wind and directly entered the ears of the outer mansion master. Of course, there are differences. Where there are people, there will be competition. Only with competition can there be improvement. In order to make the competition between the students more intense, the Sword Mansion has specially divided the sword towers of the inner mansion and the king's mansion into different levels. The outer mansion master explained, Chi transformation realm cultivators can communicate with the outside world and absorb the surrounding spiritual Chi into their body to refine and improve their Xiantian sword Chi cultivation. Therefore, every sword tower has a spirit gathering array and spirit tempering array, which can absorb the spiritual chi from outside the sword tower and refine it inside the sword tower, making it purer and easier to absorb and refine. The spirit chi inside the yellow grade sword tower is 50% more than the spirit chi outside the sword tower. The purity of the spirit chi also surpasses 50%. The profound grade sword tower is 100%, the earth grade sword tower is 150%, and the heaven grade sword tower is 20%. Chu Mu's eyes flashed. The sword towers in the outer mansion probably also had the so-called spirit gathering array. But for sword chi transformation realm cultivators, it only had the effect of nourishing their body for a long time. For chi transformation realm cultivators, not only could the spiritual chi nourish their body, they could also directly absorb it and transform it into Xiantian sword chi to improve their cultivation. The benefits were many times greater. The difference between 1 time and 1.5 times was not simple. It was like the difference between 2 years of cultivation and 3 years of cultivation. 1 year's time could often increase the distance by quite a lot. Of course, students who have just entered the inner mansion can only stay in the yellow sword tower. There is only one way to stay in a higher level sword tower. The outer mansion master paused for a moment, then said with a sharp tone, "With the sword in your hand, you have to challenge and defeat opponents one after another. In the end, you will have the right to stay in the heaven sword tower." Although the outer mansion master's words made one's blood boil, Chu Mu was still able to maintain his composure. "Are there any restrictions?" "Yes, of course there are. If you want to challenge the right to stay in a higher level sword tower, you have to go up step by step. First, you have to apply to the 100 Affair Hall for a deacon to be the witness and challenge a student of the same level. If you win 10 times in a row within a month, you will have the right to challenge a student 1 level higher than you. If you defeat the opponent, you will have the right to stay in the opponent's sword tower and can continue to challenge. If you lose, you will not have the right to challenge for 3 months. The outer mansion master's tone became gentle again as he said. The red-crowned cranes flew down, and countless sword towers quickly enlarged in front of their eyes. Soon, the red-crowned cranes landed in front of the Flying Cranes Tower. The Flying Cranes Tower was a sword palace organization that specialized in taming the red-crowned cranes. Led by the outer mansion master, they passed through countless sword towers and quickly headed towards the 100 Affair Hall. With the outer mansion master's help, the process of reaching the 100 Affair Hall was exceptionally smooth. The so-called test consisted of 2 tests. The first test was to see if his dantian was filled with innate sword chi. The test tool was a specially made crystal ball. The deacon asked Chu Mu to place his palm on it and circulate his innate sword chi. The crystal ball immediately emitted a pure red luster. The deacon stared at it carefully for a while, then nodded and said that it was a pass. If there were impurities in the red luster, it meant that the innate sword chi was not pure enough. It could also be caused by the acquired sword chi or other factors. This would affect the swordsman's future cultivation and improvement. The second test was to see if the swordsman's control of the innate sword chi was good enough. The most direct method was to use the innate sword chi to release a sword chi slash to attack the test wall. Chu Mu unsheathed his sword and slashed out without any pretense. The innate sword chi surged and gathered, leaving the sword blade and forming an arc. It directly slashed at a specially made black wall 10 meters away. With a bang, the innate sword chi slash shattered, and the black wall flashed with a red luster. And not bad. Your attacks are clean and efficient, and your sword chi is flowing smoothly. Your attack power is also up to standard. The deacon nodded with a faint look of admiration on his face. You have passed both tests. Congratulations. You have become a member of the inner mansion. Now, give me your identity, sword token. Chu Mu took out his identity, sword token, and handed it to the deacon. The outer mansion master stood to the side and watched without saying a word. Chu Mu's identity, sword token, was also changed. His internal information was changed from outer mansion disciple to inner mansion disciple. However, when the deacon in charge saw that Chu Mu had more than 20,000 academic credits left in his sword token, he was shocked. This was because he rarely met a new inner mansion disciple who had more than 20,000 academic credits in his sword token. Such people would usually become famous in the inner mansion and were not ordinary people. The newest batch of new students to enter the outer mansion. It seems that you have obtained a very high ranking in the 3 natural barriers, the deacon said with a smile as he handed the identity sword token back to Chu Mu. His attitude was much gentler than before. Chu Mu's talent is not bad, the outer mansion master said. A student that you have personally brought here is naturally extraordinary. The outer mansion master's cultivation and status were above the deacon's, so his tone was very respectful. He then looked at Chu Mu. With your ability, you should receive better training. I suggest that you choose between astral, 1 astral, 2 or astral, 3 to join the Heavenly King Palace, the Sword Pavilion, or the Heavenly Music Pavilion. If you stand out, you will definitely be valued and receive more resources for training. If you are willing, I can recommend you to join the Heavenly King Palace. You will immediately enter the eyes of the higher-ups there. Don't interfere with him, the outer mansion master said calmly. He knew that this was a very normal situation. Once an outstanding student entered the inner mansion, the deacons would be the first to interact with them. Although the competition between the 10 academies was now prohibited, some small tricks were still allowed. For example, if Chu Mu accepted the deacon's recommendation to join the Heavenly King Palace, then Chu Mu would be recognized as someone worthy of training after passing the Heavenly King Palace's test. The deacon would also receive a reward from the Heavenly King Palace. Yes. I'm just giving you a suggestion, the deacon said. Thank you for your kindness, but I choose Astral 9, Chu Mu said. Zhu Gaming was in Astral 9, so Chu Mu subconsciously thought of Astral 9. Also, I choose a challenge, Chu Mu added. A challenge? The deacon was stunned for a moment before saying, Oh, you want a challenge? I understand. Go to Astral 9's Hall of 100 Affairs first. I'll make arrangements for the challenge and inform you tomorrow. Let's go. I'll take you to Astral 9. The outer mansion master did not interfere with Chu Mu's choice. Chu Mu, I have to report this matter to the higher-ups. Perhaps on this challenge I can... The attendant watched Chu Mu's departing figure, and a strange light revolved in his eyes as he quietly spoke. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 207. Chu Mu. Top 3 in the 3 natural barriers, persisted for 100 incense sticks in the 3rd ranking battle of the small sword pagoda, and had a spirit energy vortex of 100 meters when he broke through. All of these points show that he is not an ordinary genius, and is worthy of being recruited by the Heavenly Emperor Palace. However, it is not that easy to gain the attention of the Heavenly Emperor Palace. Since he wants to challenge them, arrange a good opponent for him to enter the Heavenly Emperor Palace. Yes, there are more than 7,000 students in Astral 9, which meant that there were more than 7,000 Chi transformation realm swordsmen. Each of them was powerful. Now, Chu Mu had become one of the 7,000 or so. The 7,823rd tower was a yellow-ranked tower, and it was also the tower that Chu Mu had been assigned to. This tower was 50% larger than the 5th tower that he had previously lived in, but it also had 2 floors. Chu Mu sat on a cushion on the 2nd floor of the tower, carefully reading a book in his hands. 3 levels of primal Qi was a low-grade, black-ranked sword Qi technique that had 3 levels. It was the normal innate sword Qi technique that Chu Mu had received when he had arrived at the Hall of 100 Affairs of Astral 9. The Hall of 100 Affairs had prepared sword Qi techniques of the same level but different types. They would be given a copy based on the student's choice, and it was up to the student to decide whether or not they wanted to practice it. Some students had higher standards and looked down on this kind of ordinary sword chi art. They would often go to the scripture pavilion to exchange their credits for a better sword chi art. Almost everyone wanted to do so, but in the end, most of them had no choice but to cultivate the ordinary mystic level low-grade sword chi art that was given for free. Chu Mu did not plan to practice it. He just wanted to see what was the difference between the low-grade, black-ranked sword chi technique and the yellow-ranked sword chi technique. The low-grade, black-ranked sword chi technique started at the chi transformation realm, and the sword chi that was cultivated was the innate sword chi. However, different grades of sword chi techniques would result in different innate sword chi. Although it's better than the Shangyuan sword chi technique, it's still inferior to the dark blood sword chi technique. Furthermore, it's several times harder to advance to the Xian sword chi technique than the Huang level. Chu Mu's brows furrowed slightly. He closed the book and put it aside. Find some time to go to the Hidden Art Pavilion and see if there are any techniques that I'm satisfied with. The seal of the sword gauntlet was triggered. Chu Mu went downstairs and saw a man standing outside the seal of the sword gauntlet. The attire he was wearing indicated that he was from the Hall of 100 Things. Chu Mu, I'm here to inform you that the challenge you applied for has been confirmed. Tomorrow, you'll be fighting Meng Chao at the 100th Arena, the person from 100 Affairs Hall said directly. All right. Chu Mu nodded. The deacon looked at Chu Mu, and his lips moved slightly as if he wanted to say something. However, he stopped himself and turned to leave. Chu Mu didn't mind and returned to the second floor of the Sword Tower. A challenge tomorrow. Very efficient. Chu Mu sat down cross-legged. I wonder how strong Meng Chao is. I won't be going to the Hidden Art Pavilion for now. I'll adjust my body for tomorrow's battle. In a Huang-level sword tower in Astral 9. They actually want me to fight a new student. Meng Chao stood at the window and looked outside. He muttered to himself, a new student's cultivation is at most at the initial stage of the Qi transformation realm. However, I've already reached the initial stage of the Qi transformation realm. Even though I'm cultivating the normal Xian sword Qi technique that's given to me for free, I've already reached the last level. As he spoke, a hint of joy appeared on his face. As long as I defeat this person, I'll be able to join the Heavenly King Hall and become a member. I'll also be able to receive rewards. Who knows, I might even be able to get the sword Qi technique that I want. Chu Mu, tomorrow you'll become my stepping stone. It was not a rare thing for a new student to choose a challenge. Therefore, when the news spread, it did not cause much of a reaction. Only a small number of people showed interest in it. Although they were interested, they only knew that it was a new student and did not know his name. Most people did not pay much attention to it. A day passed quickly, and Chu Mu finished adjusting. His body was filled with Xiantian sword Qi, and his spirit was at its peak. He left the sword tower and prepared to head to arena number 100. Astral 9 was very large, and there were more than 7,000 students. Battles often broke out, and in order to deal with such situations, the Sword Manor had specially built 100 arenas in each academy. However, as a new student, Chu Mu wasn't familiar with Astral 9, so he didn't know where arena number 100 was. As Chu Mu was thinking, someone passed by him, so Chu Mu asked casually, "May I ask where arena number 100 is?" "Are you also going to watch the new student challenge Meng Chao?" The person stopped and turned around to look at Chu Mu. His thick eyebrows and large eyes gave him a forthright feeling. Yes, Chu Mu nodded, but he didn't say that he was the new student. The person didn't suspect anything. Although he had never seen Chu Mu before, there were more than 8,000 students in Astral 9. Aside from those who were somewhat famous, there were also some who weren't well known. "Perfect, I'm going to watch as well. Come with me." The person suddenly laughed. "I'm Liang Haishan. What's your name?" "Chu Mu." Chu Mu faintly smiled and said. Liang Haishan looked at Chu Mu carefully and sensed the fluctuations of Xian Tian, sword qi on Chu Mu. Based on your cultivation, you should be a new student as well, right? Yes. Chu Mu nodded. Then, do you know how strong the person challenging Meng Chao is? Liang Haishan asked. His strength should be all right, Chu Mu replied. Liang Haishan led the way, and the two of them quickly made their way to the 100th arena. You new students have only just broken through to the Qi transformation realm. You haven't even cultivated a profound level sword Qi technique yet, so your Xiantian sword Qi isn't thick enough and pure enough. Liang Haishan expressed his opinion. I know Meng Chao. He recently broke through to the Qi transformation realm, and although the sword Qi technique he's cultivating is a free, low-grade, profound-level sword Qi technique, it's said that he's already cultivated it to the 3rd level. He's also comprehended about 30% of the concept of fire, which is approaching 40%. He's also mastered a supreme, fire-type sword technique. Although I don't know how far he's cultivated it, he's definitely not weak. In my opinion, there's no doubt that the new student will win. Chu Mu didn't say anything and just listened carefully. Don't you think it's strange? Normally, this kind of challenge shouldn't have such a huge disparity in strength. Why is it like this time? Did the people from the Hall of 100 Affairs make a mistake? Liang Haishan seemed to be talking to Chu Mu, but also seemed to be talking to himself. Chu Mu didn't know either. All he needed to do was defeat Meng Chao and win. As they walked, the two of them arrived at the 100th arena. There were already a dozen people gathered around the arena. One of them was from the Hall of 100 Affairs, acting as the referee. Occasionally, there would be 2 or 3 people walking over from afar. Look, that's Meng Chao, Liang Haishan said in a low voice. Chu Mu looked over and saw a young man with good looks, but a scar on his right cheek talking and laughing with the 2 swordsmen next to him on the side of the stage. His sword Qi is indeed stronger than mine, Chu Mu thought to himself. However, this wasn't the key to victory. Chu Mu didn't care. Liang Haishan, I knew you'd come, someone said to Liang Haishan with a smile. Aren't you here too? Liang Haishan laughed. Who is he? The person asked, looking at Chu Mu. He's also a new student. His name is Chu Mu. Liang Haishan's voice wasn't soft. Everyone present heard him. Suddenly, Meng Chao looked over and stared at Chu Mu for a few breaths. It was as if he wanted to see through Chu Mu. He's Chu Mu? The one who's going to fight you? A swordsman next to Meng Chao frowned. He looks ordinary. There's nothing special about him. His sword Qi is only at the entry level of Qi transformation, another person said. Liang Haishan was stunned. He didn't expect that the person he brought here would be the one who was going to fight Meng Chao. What a dramatic scene. Meng Chao jumped and landed on the arena. He looked down at Chu Mu and said coldly, Come up. Let me defeat you with one strike. Don't waste time. Haha, Meng Chao, you can't be like this. No matter what, you're a senior. You should go easy on your junior. Even if you have to defeat him in the end, you should at least give him time to show his strength. A young swordsman who was chatting with Meng Chao said with a mocking smile. That's right. Defeating a new student with one strike is too cruel for him. Another person chimed in. Hey. Don't be so arrogant. Fighting isn't about talking. Liang Haishan frowned and retorted unhappily, Besides, can you really defeat him with one strike? Liang Haishan, don't tell me you think highly of this new student again? I remember that all the new students you thought highly of weren't that good. It's none of your business whether I think highly of him or not, Liang Haishan said angrily with a frown. I'm just reminding you. Don't think highly of a new student so casually. He might embarrass you again. The other person curled his lips. Well, since both sides are here, let's start the challenge. The deacon of the 100 Affairs Hall interrupted, sounding a little impatient. Chu Mu jumped lightly and landed on the arena. facing Meng Chao with a distance of 20 meters. Junior brother, I have a good suggestion. Meng Chao's eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness. He suddenly said, I see that you've just entered the inner mansion and haven't practiced the profound level sword aura arts. I guess you won't be interested in the free, ordinary version. But the sword aura arts in the scripture pavilion costs a lot of credits. As your senior, I'll take care of you. As long as you can withstand 10 strikes from me, I'll give you 1,000 credits. How about it? That's a good suggestion, isn't it? The dozen people below the arena suddenly laughed. Of course, they knew very well that this was just one of Meng Chao's tricks. Before the battle started, he wanted to oppress his opponent with his momentum and put his opponent at a disadvantage. In this way, it would be easier to defeat his opponent. Once Chumu agreed, he would be affected by Meng Chao, which would be very disadvantageous for the battle. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chijian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 208. 1,000 is too little. Chumu paused for a moment. Then a smile appeared on his face. Oh, too little? Junior brother, it's not good to be too greedy. Meng Chao smiled and said, How about this? As long as you can withstand 10 strikes, I'll give you 2,000 credits. That should be enough, right? You should know that even if you become an inner palace student, you can only get 1,000 credits per month under normal circumstances. I also have a suggestion, Chumu suddenly said. Junior brother, what's your suggestion? Meng Chao pretended to be surprised, completely different from his previous cold demeanor. If we're going to play, let's play big. Chumu smiled. I have 20,000 credits as a bet. If you win, the 20,000 credits are yours. If you lose, you have to give me 20,000 credits. Do you dare? 20,000 credits? The people below were stunned. How can a new student have 20,000 credits? There's one possibility, and that is that he got his credits from the 3 natural barriers. That is to say, when Chumu just entered the outer palace, he was at least in the top 10. No, he should be in the top 4. So what if he got first place in the 3 natural barriers? That's the result of the outer palace. It's different from the inner palace. At best, it can be said that this person has a lot of room for improvement, surpassing ordinary people. But now he hasn't even cultivated a mystic level sword aura. How can his overall strength compare to Meng Chao, who is already at the initial success of the Qi transformation realm? That's true. Geniuses also need time to grow. Lian Haishan was even more surprised. He didn't expect that a random guide would turn out to be a genius. Meng Chao accepted his bet. If you don't have enough credits, I still have some. The 2 people who were chatting with Meng Chao before started to jeer. I have 15,000 credits. If I get 20,000 more, I'll have 35,000 credits. The mystic level sword aura that I want needs 40,000 credits, Meng Chao thought to himself. When he heard the people below, he clenched his teeth and made a decision. He said firmly, Final bet. I'll take the 20,000 credits. Let the battle begin. The 100 Affairs Hall's deacon saw that both sides had reached an agreement and immediately announced. A fiery red sword Qi condensed and released an astonishing scorching heat as it shot towards Chumu. Chumu moved, and 10 afterimages appeared in a flash to avoid Meng Chao's innate sword Qi. He even appeared beside Meng Chao and drew his sword to attack. He actually cultivated the phantom steps to perfection. The spectators were immediately astonished. Chumu killed Meng Chao with a single slash, but Meng Chao's figure gradually faded away. His real body appeared behind Chumu, and with a single slash of his sword, more than a dozen streams of fire streaked past. Lu Hu directly pierced through Chumu. So it was just an afterimage. Meng Chao's footwork was also at a high level, and he had also perfected it. He did not lose to Chumu. When the 2 of them used their footwork to fight, they moved so quickly that it dazzled the onlookers. The sword Meng Chao used was a low-grade sword, and each slash contained powerful waves of fire. It made the air around him even hotter, and it affected his thirst. But to Chu Mu, who had achieved a small mastery of sword force, it made no difference. When the two swords collided, Meng Chao's strength was stronger than Chu Mu's, but he could not suppress him. The power that burst out from his sword was often scattered by Chu Mu in a strange way. After more than 10 slashes, he still could not defeat Chu Mu. He did not even have the slightest sign of defeating Chu Mu. Meng Chao frowned. "It's your honor to have me use a super-class sword art against you." Meng Chao let out a low roar and changed his sword technique. It was as if flames had sprung up around his body and became fierce and violent. He thrust his sword forward with the momentum of a raging fire, wanting to burn Chu Mu to ashes. "It's the fiery sword art." "Looks like Meng Chao has already mastered it," the onlookers whispered. "A super-class sword art is very powerful. A new student can't possibly master it. This Chu Mu is bound to lose." "How pitiful. 20,000 credits. He's too impulsive." Liang Haishan shook his head. Chu Mu was like a person who lived in fire for eternity. The high temperature could not affect him at all, but the power of a super-class sword art was still very terrifying. At first, it was difficult for him to dodge Meng Chao's fiery sword art. He had integrated 40% of the essence of clouds and combined phantom steps and wind walk to the extreme. Although the essence of clouds could not increase the speed of footwork and body movement, it could make it more unpredictable. Chu Mu's eyes were unusually bright as he stared at Meng Chao's swordsmanship. Although he had the super-class sword art, wind form, he did not have a super-class sword art. Chu Mu also wanted to know how powerful a super-class sword art was and how much stronger it was compared to an advanced sword art. Unfortunately, Meng Chao's fiery sword art was only at a small mastery level. He had not mastered the killer move, so he performed more than a dozen basic moves. After the first time, Chu Mu knew how to deal with it. How is this possible? They were all shocked that this new student could withstand a super-class sword art and not be defeated. "I don't believe that I can't defeat you." Meng Chao was determined. He integrated more than 30% of the essence of fire into his fiery sword art. In an instant, the fire surged as if adding oil to the fire. Its power increased by a lot. Even the basic moves were not inferior to an ordinary advanced sword art killer move. Thinking about it, the power of each move was comparable to an advanced sword art killer move. It was like continuously performing advanced sword art killer moves. It was very terrifying. Meng Chao is going all out. The power has increased a lot, but the realm of his swordsmanship is too low. "I've already seen through it," Chu Mu thought to himself. After breaking through to the Qi transformation realm, his soul power had increased a lot. Although he still could not release his soul power, his 5 senses had multiplied. It was easier for him to see through the weaknesses of his opponent's swordsmanship. Chu Mu was only dodging now. He did not counterattack because he was looking for a chance to kill with one strike. Chu Mu's entire body seemed to be engulfed in flames. In everyone's eyes, there were only streaks of flames shooting out from Meng Chao's hands. Even the sword couldn't be seen. It was as if Meng Chao wasn't holding a sword but flames. What a fierce attack. "Even I would have a hard time facing it," Liang Haishan said with a serious face. "I don't know why this challenge is arranged. The difference is too big." The deacon of the Hall of 100 Affairs thought. He subconsciously thought that Chu Mu would lose. Even a swordsman in the initial stage of the Qi transformation realm would have a hard time facing such an attack, let alone a new student. Now, Chu Mu's eyes flashed. He used the cloud-shattering sword explosion with 40% of the essence of clouds to reopen the fire. He stabbed out again like a gust of wind, and a clear sound was heard. In an instant, the burning fire in the sky disappeared like an illusion. Chu Mu's sword stopped steadily at Meng Chao's throat. What's going on?" Everyone was stunned. Meng Chao also could not believe the result. He did not even know what was going on. He only felt that his opponent had made a move. Soon, there was a fluctuation of essence in the air, and his sword was knocked away. Chu Mu wins the challenge. The deacon of the Hall of 100 Affairs came back to his senses after a while and announced loudly, "To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijin. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 209. Six-Pad Side. It's not easy to keep your hands cold on such a cold day. Give me some monthly tickets to warm yourself up. Meng Chao was not satisfied with his loss. He felt that he had lost not because of his strength, but because of his luck. But no matter what, a loss was a loss, especially under the supervision of the 100 Affair Hall. He had lost, and there was no way he could go back on his word. If he did not admit it, his reputation would be ruined. Damn it, if I had another chance, he would never have beaten me. Meng Chao clenched his fists and said fiercely, "Meng Chao, let's make it clear. Those 5,000 credits are just a loan. You have to pay me back as soon as possible." A young swordsman next to him said, "Don't worry, I won't shortchange you." Meng Chao looked at him coldly and said, coldly. He snorted and strode away. Look at that attitude. The young swordsman was angry. If I hadn't lent him those 5,000 credits out of kindness, I'd like to see what would have happened to him. It's okay if he didn't thank me, but he treated me with that attitude. He's so despicable. Forget it. Let's go. It's not like you don't know this kind of person. Another person said, "What I care more about is that new student called Chu Mu. I didn't see how he defeated Meng Chao. I didn't see it clearly either. Congratulations. It was so unexpected." Lian Haishan laughed. He looked very happy, as if he was the one who had defeated Meng Chao. Chu Mu smiled and nodded. He had expected to defeat Meng Chao, but he did not expect it to be so fast. In fact, with Meng Chao's strength, if he had taken Chu Mu seriously, it would not have been so easy for Chu Mu to defeat him. It could only be said that he had underestimated Chu Mu from the beginning. When he did not defeat Chu Mu in the last 10 moves, he felt a little unbalanced. He did not adjust quickly and used almost all his strength. From the very beginning, when Meng Chao wanted to attack Chu Mu with his imposing manner, Chu Mu's suggestion of a bet was a great counterattack, and before he knew it, Meng Chao was already at a disadvantage. On the other hand, the breakthrough in the Qi transformation realm had not only brought Chu Mu a breakthrough in his sword aura, but also in other aspects. As a result, Chu Mu's advantage had been magnified, and it was only natural that he had defeated Meng Chao. By the way, how did you defeat Meng Chao in the end? Lian Haishan asked curiously. Attack the weak point, Chu Mu said simply. Weakness. Lian Haishan pondered. Everyone knew that attacking the opponent's weak points would defeat them, but the problem was how to find the weak points. This was not a simple matter. It required extremely strong eyesight. This eyesight could be innate, or it could be acquired through hard work. Chu Mu's eyesight originated from his vision sword, because he had broken through to the Qi transformation realm. His vision sword had also improved. It was only a paper's breadth away from perfection. Finding the weak point was only the first step. Although there were not many swordsmen who could find the opponent's weak point, it was not too rare. The key was whether or not one could hit the weak point after finding it. Only by hitting the weak point could there be an effect. Otherwise, even if the opponent had all the weak points waiting for you, if you could not hit them, you would only feel stifled. You have 20,000 credits. Adding the 20,000 credits you won from Meng Chao, you have a total of 40,000 credits. You can go to the Scripture Tower and choose a Mystic class mid-grade sword aura art to cultivate. Lian Haishan suggested after he recovered from his shock. Middle grade Mystic class. Chu Mu repeated. He really did not want a Mystic class mid-grade one. He felt that the level was too low. he should at least choose a mystic class, high-grade one. The sword aura arts in the scripture tower, a mystic class low-grade one costs 20,000 credits, a middle-grade one costs 40,000, and a high-grade one costs 80,000. Some high-grade sword aura arts even cost 90 to 100,000. As for the best ones, they cost at least 160,000. Liang Haishan explained, such a high number of credits often makes people flinch. For example, you have 40,000 credits as soon as you enter the inner academy. That's already a very high starting point. At least 80,000 academic credits. Chu Mu nodded his head and thought about how to get the remaining 40,000 academic credits. At least 40,000 academic credits. Oh, right, you live in the 7,823rd tower, right? I live in the 6,200th tower. I hope we can exchange pointers in the future, Liang Haishan said. Okay. Chu Mu nodded and parted ways with Liang Haishan. He went to Astral Nine's Hall of 100 Affairs to collect what was rightfully his. Because you defeated Meng Chao and passed the challenge, you will receive an additional low-grade sword as a reward, the Hall of 100 Affairs administrator said seriously. What element do you need? Wind element, Chu Mu said. He was the first to comprehend the concept of wind. His first super sword technique was also of the wind element, and his first concept was the concept of wind. Wind element. The administrator nodded and got up to walk inside. Chu Mu pulled out the fake clear wind sword and looked at it. There was a conspicuous gap on the blade. It had been caused by the collision with Meng Chao's sword. This wasn't because Chu Mu's strength was inferior to Meng Chao's, but because a fake sword was still a fake sword. It couldn't compare to a real sword. After a while, the administrator walked out with a sheathed sword in his hand. The sheath was light green and had strange patterns on it. The administrator handed the sword to Chu Mu and said, "This is the low-grade, clear wind sword. It's yours from now on." Clear wind sword. Chu Mu was slightly stunned. He took the sword, and a trace of absent-mindedness flashed through his eyes. He remembered that when he had obtained the fake clear wind sword, the head of the Qingfeng sword sect, Luo Tianxiong, had said that the fake clear wind sword was an imitation of the low-grade clear wind sword. He didn't think that he would be able to obtain the clear wind sword now. This could be considered a kind of fate. His left hand held the sword hilt. There was a familiar yet strange feeling. It was familiar because the fake clear wind sword was an imitation of the clear wind sword, so it was basically the same. It was strange because it was the real clear wind sword and not the fake clear wind sword. There were 3 sharp words on the sheath. Clear wind sword. Chu Mu's right hand held the sword hilt and used a bit of strength. Immediately, a clear sound rang out, filled with sharpness. It was as if a breeze had blown past his ears. He slowly pulled the sword out, along with the ear-piercing sound of metal rubbing against metal. Chu Mu's eyes were suddenly illuminated by the sword light. His pupils shrank as he stared at the sword. The clear wind sword's body was also a light cyan color, but it was even purer than the fake clear wind sword's light cyan color. It gave people the feeling that a wisp of wind was attached to it. Chu Mu lightly waved the clear wind sword, and the light cyan color suddenly began to flow. Faintly, there seemed to be a clear sound of wind passing through one's ears. The clear wind sword can increase the power of wind sword arts by 10%. The 100 Affair Hall's attendant said, 10%. If the complete version of wind sword can increase its power by 10%, then it will be even more terrifying. Chu Mu thought to himself. He put down the sheath and used his left hand's index finger and middle finger like a sword. He slowly stroked the clear wind sword's body, feeling the cold touch on his fingertips. He couldn't bear to put it down. But there is a limit to this increase. The 100 Affair Hall's attendant said, because of the limitations of the materials, a low-grade sword can only increase the power of a super-level sword art or skill by 10%. At most, it can increase it by 15%. For those below super level, it can increase it by 20 or even 30%. Chu-Mu nodded. He wasn't surprised. After all, it was only a low-grade sword. If the increase was too much, then it would be heaven-defying. Sometimes a 10% increase could be the key to turning the situation around. Now I finally have my first sword. Although it is only a low-grade sword, I believe that I can get a high-grade sword or even a high-grade sword. Chu-Mu thought to himself. But before that, I need to obtain another low-rank sword. Only then will the dual sword technique have a place to be used. After reaching the initial level of the dual sword arts, it could increase Chu-Mu's power by 30%. Collecting his thoughts, Chu-Mu put the sword back into its sheath and hung the fake Clear Wind sword on his waist. His left hand held the real Clear Wind sword. No matter what, the fake Clear Wind sword had been with him for a long time. It had killed and defeated many enemies. Although it couldn't keep up with Chu-Mu's footsteps, Chu-Mu wouldn't just abandon it. Goodbye, Chu-Mu said to the 100 Affair Hall's attendant and turned to leave. At the same time, a person walked in with a majestic gait and blocked Chu-Mu's path. This person was tall and strong, with thick eyebrows and big eyes. His masculine face naturally had a domineering aura. His tiger-like eyes stared at Chu-Mu for 3 breaths of time before he grinned. Let me introduce myself. I am Huangfu Tsang, a student of Astral 1 and a member of the Heavenly King Palace. First of all, congratulations on defeating Meng Chao and passing the Heavenly King Palace's test. Now, follow me to Astral 1 and change your identity, sword token. You will be a member of the Heavenly King Palace from now on. Chu-Mu frowned. So his challenge with Meng Chao had been arranged by the Heavenly King Palace. If it hadn't been for the Heavenly King Palace's interference, he probably wouldn't have met Meng Chao's average opponent. At most, he would have met someone who was also at the beginning of the Qi transformation realm. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The Heavenly King Palace's influence was so great that they could influence the decisions of the 100 Affair Hall. I'm sorry, but I don't want to join any organization, Chu-Mu said indifferently. The Heavenly Emperor Palace was indeed unexpectedly powerful. But Chu-Mu had never thought of joining the Heavenly Emperor Palace's Sword Pavilion. You don't want to join? The person from the Heavenly King Palace was stunned. He had thought that Lu Yin would be overjoyed when he heard that he would become a member of the Heavenly King Palace. But it was the opposite. Lu Yin had calmly rejected the offer. The person's face darkened. You have to think this through. You only have one chance. If you miss it, then you miss it. There won't be a second chance. You should know that with your talent, you will definitely be valued by the Vice Palace Master and will be heavily nurtured. When the time comes, all kinds of cultivation resources will be at your fingertips, and your strength will increase rapidly. If you refuse, then you will have to spend a lot of time on your own to accumulate bit by bit. For us swordsmen, time is life. Thank you for your kindness, but if I want to join any organization, I will choose the Heavenly King Palace first. Chu-Mu said calmly. Although the person's tone wasn't very good, he wasn't aggressive and didn't make Chu-Mu feel disgusted. All right, since you don't want to join, I won't force you. However, the news of you rejecting the Heavenly King Palace's invitation will spread very quickly. When the time comes, some people from the Heavenly King Palace might come looking for trouble with you. You'd better watch out. After the person finished speaking, he left decisively. I'm afraid you will be in trouble in the future. The 100 Affair Hall's deacon smiled bitterly. Chu-Mu smiled and left the 100 Affair Hall. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation.